Chapter Volume 328. Overbearing. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. This fierce shout in these quiet surroundings immediately made all eyes gather on Lu Ziyu's body. In reality, Lu Ziyu wasn't someone truly narrow-minded. His city supervisor father was about to be promoted to the rank of provincial supervisor while still in his robust years, not needing to wait for an opportunity through auxiliary positions at all. This type of great rank skipping ascent, apart from needing extraordinary military achievements and displaying an exceptional performance while serving as a city supervisor, he truly had the ability, a wise and far-sighted extraordinary individual. This type of exceptional individual naturally also understood just what kind of qualities his own child should have extremely clearly, and naturally fostered him in that direction. However, Lu Ziyu was still young after all. He just couldn't understand why the more calm Lin Shi was, the more undisturbed Lin Shi was, the harder it was for him to keep his cool, instead forcing him to become narrow-minded. This was like a great river encountering a great sea, forced to display how small it was. Qin Siya's figure froze momentarily, the displeasure in her expression finally impossible to conceal. Her jade-like face seemed to have been covered in a layer of early morning frost. The reason she replied to Lu Ziyu was only out of courtesy to him as a fellow student from the medicine department, yet Lu Ziyu loudly shouted out the contents of their conversation. For her, this was naturally extremely disrespectful. In reality, the moment Lu Ziyu's words left his mouth, his hands and feet went cold, also immediately feeling great regret. There were only 2 weeks or so left from his agreement with Lin Shi, so why was he so restless, moreover having to say this out loud? He naturally also sensed Qin Siya's annoyance. This naturally made him feel even more angry. That was why he couldn't back off, because only by exposing this continuously indifferent 90 Jin Heaven's choice, this youngster who was always putting on an act, could Qin Siya and the others' opinions of him change a bit. Lin Shi always felt like the highest honor in an argument, was being extremely amused himself while arguing, while the other party was furious to the point of vomiting blood. When he saw this Lu Ziyu who he wasn't fond of from the moment they met, Lin Shi inwardly laughed, and then wanted to open his mouth and say, "This is between me and Siya, what does it have to do with you?" However, before he said anything, Jiang Xiaoyi next to him instead frowned greatly, coldly looking at the overbearing Lu Ziyu, saying, "How he proves himself to Qin Siya is between him and Qin Siya, what does it have to do with you?" When Jiang Xiaoyi said this, Lu Ziyu and Qin Siya were both stunned. If Meng Bai was the one who spoke this, no one would become shocked, because most of the students knew that Meng Bai, a bumpkin with quite good aptitude, was good friends with Lin Shi. However, Jiang Xiaoyi, this natural arts department student, shouldn't have had much interaction with Lin Shi. Moreover, stepping out for him when Lin Shi had such a bad reputation, this situation became a bit strange. Because he could no longer go back, Lu Ziyu, who was angered by Jiang Xiaoyi's words until his entire body was shaking, forcefully took a step forward, glaring at Jiang Xiaoyi and saying, "And who are you? When I speak to Lin Shi, don't tell me I have to listen to you." "Forget it, Jiang Xiaoyi, don't argue with him anymore." Right at this time, Lin Shi instead patted Jiang Xiaoyi, who was also angered to the point where his face was a bit red. He pointed at the Wolverine Bai Zihu and the others had already skinned, and then pointed into the distance, "Lu Ziyu, Bai Zihu and the others are fellow students from medicine department, your buddy's right. In that case, even if you want me to prove something, I fear that you still have to help them deal with the incoming trouble first." Everyone looked in the direction Lin Shi's finger was pointing towards, only seeing a dense cluster of gold appear from behind a hill. That was a group of less than 10 people, all of them dressed in similar golden-fitted apparel. Qin Siya's jade face became slightly cold. She looked at the somewhat stunned Bai Zihu and others, asking, "What kind of background do these people really have?" "They are Thunder Academy's people." Bai Zihu said a bit absent-mindedly, "Why are there so many people from Thunder Academy in Heaven Ascension Mountain Range?" Thunder Academy. Lin Shi was stunned, while Qin Siya and the others were all momentarily bewildered. Yunqin Empire had three great academies, precisely Green One Academy, Thunder Academy, and Immortal Academy. Even though in the eyes of Yunqin's cultivators, Green One Academy was naturally the only Holy Land, Thunder Academy and Immortal Academy, these two great academies had no way of matching Green One Academy's prestige and backing. What they could not ignore was that in the recent decade, Thunder Academy and Immortal Academy's people were already not below Green One Academies. According to government and justice sector statistics, among the number of newly promoted officials, the students from the three great academies have already truly become the 3 feet of a cauldron. Meanwhile, regardless of whether it was in the imperial court or the local areas and border armies, the students from Thunder and Immortal Academy wouldn't necessarily have that much respect towards Green One Academy's students, some disputes happening from time to time. Lin Shi didn't bat an eyelid as he watched Thunder Academy's people get closer and closer, the patterns on their lightweight fitted golden clothes also becoming more and more clear. There were 12 people in total, all of similar age. The current Lin Shi was already not that ignorant youngster from Deerwood Town who didn't have much interaction with this world. Even though Vice Principal Xia didn't let him come into contact with the true undercurrents of this world, he at least already understood that Thunder Academy was located on Rolling Thunder Mountain 500 li west of Central Continent Imperial City. Even if they were just cultivating, it wasn't too likely for them to travel through a smaller half of Yunqin, run all the way to Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. From the moment he saw all of the Academy's new students arrive in half-snow gray plains to cultivate, and then saw Thunder Academy students, Lin Shi knew there was definitely some type of connection, and there were definitely many issues involved. For a golden spoon like Lu Ziyu, even though his family's authority still wasn't enough to know why Thunder Academy's students would appear here, nor did he know what their appearance here represented, he who came from a military family understood more clearly than the others here that during these years, Thunder Academy and Immortal Academy's students were becoming more and more overbearing. In addition, when some of the students who came out from Green One Academy had disputes with the students of these other two academies, they might not necessarily have it easy. Meanwhile, this was precisely the reason why the outside world felt like Green One Academy was gradually weakening over the years, while the other two academies were now on par with Green One Academy. Of the 12 Thunder Academy students, the one in the lead was a young man with thick brows, big eyes, and a wide forehead. At his waist hung a wide blade-like piece of wood, a blade handle wrapped in cloth strips. There were no clear emotions on his face, remaining extremely calm. However, as he approached, everyone's breathing stopped slightly, because they could all feel this person's pride, the arrogance concealed within him he felt was beneath him to show. Lin Shi's brows furrowed slightly, because even though this was a student whose age didn't differ too greatly from his own, this group gave him a different feeling than Green One Academy's students. He actually sensed an aura that was a bit similar to Uncle Lu's who drove him to Green One Academy from their bodies. However, Uncle Lu was an old border army veteran, his experiences even more abundant than Tang Ku's. He also experienced an even more vicious mountain of corpses and sea of blood, while these were only academy students. Why did they give him this type of feeling? These individuals stopped, standing still on a hill a dozen or so steps from Bai Zihu's group. The one in the lead with the wide forehead cupped his hands in greeting, and then began to speak. His bearing had class, but his voice was incredibly domineering, directly asking Bai Zihu, "This Heaven Ascension mountain range belongs to your family." Bai Zihu was also a golden spoon whose eyes grew on his forehead. When he heard this, his expression immediately changed, asking, "What are you trying to say?" The wide forehead Thunder Academy student stared straight at Bai Zihu. "This Wolverine was raised by your family." This sentence was still extremely domineering, and the words carried an unspeakable domineering feeling, moreover completely ignoring Bai Zihu's words. It made Bai Zihu's face fall, momentarily not knowing what excuse to use. "Since this Heaven Ascension mountain range doesn't belong to your family, the Wolverine here not raised by you either, you all stole it from our hands, so we can honorably steal it back." This Thunder Academy student had a graceful bearing, but spoke words that were indescribably tyrannical and didn't care about Bai Zihu and the others' reactions, only heavily saying this. What kind of words are these? Even though the other side had more people, just like what Lin Shi said, Bai Zihu was Lu Ziyu's good friend. Even if Qin Xie wasn't here, when he saw his friend in an unfavorable situation, he couldn't help but step out. That was why when he saw Bai Zihu forcefully threatened by the other side, moreover in such an overbearing manner, Lu Ziyu immediately walked up slowly. He coldly swept his eyes over the small half of a roasted hare Lin Shi carried, over the containers, meat strips and other things these Thunder Academy students carried, saying, then according to what you all are saying, even the earth used to make those containers belongs to this Heaven Ascension mountain range, not your families, then the things on your body, we can also seize them as we wish. This world has some rules to begin with, but you all were the first to be unreasonable, so now, there are no more rules either. This Thunder Academy student directly nodded, looking straight at Lu Ziyu. The things on us, as long as they came from Heaven Ascension mountain range, then you all can naturally try to seize them, as long as you all have the strength to do so. We won't rely on greater numbers either. This wide-forehead Thunder Academy student turned around slightly, continuing immediately. He turned his head slightly, looking at a grave and stern-faced Thunder Academy student with high cheekbones. Lu Pingjiang, bring back what belongs to us. Sure. This grave-faced, high-cheekbones Thunder Academy student had a wooden blade hanging from his waist. He gave a serious and reserved bow of respect to the big forehead student, and then without wasting any words, walked towards Bai Zihu. Lu Ziyu's eyes narrowed slightly, coldly saying, you wish to become our enemies. I've heard about some of your Green One Academy's laughable regulations, but according to your rules, when facing someone from outside the academy, you should be able to act freely. The wide-forehead Thunder Academy student said indifferently, if you don't dare, then move to the side, don't waste my time. Chapter Volume 329. Nothing more than this. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Which one of you is going to come up first? Or are you all going to come at me together? The grave-faced, high-cheekbones Thunder Academy student Lu Pingjiang first bowed towards Lu Ziyu and Bai Zihu's group, his bearing extremely graceful, but his tone extremely domineering. After the bow, Lu Pingjiang didn't give Lu Ziyu and Bai Zihu the chance to speak. He brushed back his sleeves, reaching out a hand and making a "come at me" gesture. According to Yunqin's etiquette, this type of gesture was precisely the invitation for a formal fight. Qin Xie's beautiful brows were furrowed deeply. When she heard Bai Zihu and these Thunder Academy students' conversation, she originally felt that Bai Zihu and the others might have been in the wrong, but now, these Thunder Academy students were so overbearing, moreover not giving them any leeway, making even her feel a bit upset. After all, this was still Heaven Ascension mountain range. Even though this Heaven Ascension mountain range can't be said to be Green One Academies, this was where Green One Academy was located after all. It was just like Rolling Thunder Mountain where Thunder Academy was located, not showing any restraint in Heaven Ascension mountain range was undoubtedly just like striking their door. Who are these people? Bai Zihu, what do these fellas wish to do, acting so fierce? Right at this time, a sound of dried grass being crushed could be heard. An arrogant shout sounded. Lin Shi, who was originally also furrowing his brows, thinking to himself, was suddenly shocked. When he turned around, he immediately couldn't help but shake his head. Another person he didn't like had shown up. It was actually Mu Shanzi, who didn't get along with him right from the start just because he was a bumpkin. 90 Jean Heaven's choice, so you were here, what a coincidence. Biov, after speaking loudly in such an arrogant manner, he immediately saw Lin Shi. As a result, he began to laugh loudly. Only after he said this to Lin Shi did he see the hand gesture of Lu Pingjiang, thus finally reacting a bit. He looked at Lu Pingjiang and the others with an expression of surprise, saying, who are you all? Where did you all crawl out from? You actually dare to challenge our Green One Academy's people in this Heaven Ascension mountain range. Bai Zihu was already acquainted with Mu Shanzi before. He said with a low voice, "They are people from Thunder Academy." "What? Thunder Academy's people?" Mu Shanzi immediately became stunned. "How is that possible? Why would Thunder Academy's people be here? Even if you are people from Thunder Academy, you all still have to know your place in our Heaven Ascension mountain range. Being this overbearing, don't tell me you all lack a beating." After staring blankly for a moment, Mu Shanzi immediately shouted in an aggressive manner. It wasn't just Thunder Academy's people, even Qin Xie, Jiang Xiaoyi, and others frowned, thinking that his person really was ignorant. The other party already invited them to fight, could it be that they still feared getting hit? With only this level of IQ and judgment ability, just how did he get into Green One Academy? However, Bai Zihu and Lu Ziyu saw that while Mu Shanzi was shouting aggressively, he was also gesturing secretly with his eyes, the two immediately understanding Mu Shanzi's intentions. Those who could enter Green One Academy were all definitely sharp and intelligent people. Mu Shanzi's shout was clearly so that more Green One Academy students could hear this, so that when the time came, even if Bai Zihu and the others weren't a match, when Green One Academy's formidable figures came, they could still redeem themselves. Now that the two academies' students were involved, this matter was no longer limited to just a Wolverine, but included the reputation of their academies too. Nothing more than this. Lu Pingjiang, who reached out his hand, his body a bit rigid, already lost patience, uttering these four words that carried deep cold meaning. The tips of his feet tapped lightly, and then his entire body sprung out, leaping towards the Wolverine hanging above the bonfire. Just like Mu Shanzi who, even though he was arrogant and overbearing, didn't enter Green One Academy for no reason, when he saw Lu Pingjiang move, Bai Zihu revealed a serious expression, immediately nodding towards Lu Ziyu, and then took a step out to face this individual. His and the other two medicine department students' fighting strength were quite a bit lower than Lu Ziyu's. Moreover, since the other party was this forceful, knowing that this individual was definitely not weak either, in his opinion, if Lu Ziyu took action but wasn't a match, there might be no one here who could be his opponent. Instead of this, it was better for him to test the waters first, that way, Lu Ziyu can see the other party's strength and moves clearly. When faced with the incoming Lu Pingjiang who was swift like a cunning rabbit, Bai Zihu stood in front of the bonfire. While a bit nervous, he compressed his body like a spring, and then suddenly exerted force, sending a fist in Lu Pingjiang's direction. An indescribable cold smile appeared on the corners of Lu Pingjiang's mouth. He didn't change his stance at all, still grabbing forward. Pa! The sound of air and flesh colliding sounded at the same time. Bai Zihu's fist landed in Lu Pingjiang's palm. Lu Pingjiang's body suddenly shook, falling heavily into the ground like a weight, while Bai Zihu took 3 steps backwards. A look of horror covered Bai Zihu's face at the same time. His entire right arm was already completely numb, momentarily unable to raise it. Meanwhile, 5 deep gashes appeared on his back, drenched with blood. Right at this time, Lu Pingjiang's entire body sprung out without stopping at all, rushing through the air. The moment he leapt out, his body was arched like a prawn, but in an instant, borrowing the momentum of his jump, it already suddenly straightened out in the air. His hands formed claws, scratching at Bai Zihu's chest. Bai Zihu hadn't stabilized his footing yet. When facing this vicious attack, he adopted an extremely standard defensive posture, even his numb right arm forcibly raised, intersecting with his left arm, forming a cross-shaped guard. Pang! Bai Zihu's face turned pale, entire body continuously backing up. Behind him was a burning bonfire, yet even though he himself was also clearly aware of this, he couldn't stop his momentum at all. When he took 5 steps backwards, 1 foot stepped into the fire. After an extremely miserable cry of alarm, he jumped out. During this process, Lu Pingjiang who landed stably on the ground didn't pursue him further, only standing in place, watching him with a sneer. He had several gray cloth strips wrapped around his arm, precisely torn off of Bai Zihu's medicine department gray gown. Meanwhile, Bai Zihu's arms were dripping with blood, the bloody gashes horrifying. Nothing more than this. From within Thunder Academy's students, that wide-forehead leading student spoke these 4 words ruthlessly, making the face of Bai Zihu, who was busy putting out the fire on his feet, even more unpleasant. You also came. Lin Shi suddenly heard a voice next to him. When he turned around, he saw that Hua Jiyue had hurried over from who knew where, already by his side. When I was walking over just now, I already heard some of what they said. These Thunder Academy students should be doing this on purpose. These medicine department students walked right into their trap. Hua Jiyue nodded, saying quietly to Lin Shi. Lin Shi stared blankly. On purpose. This Thunder Academy student's cultivation isn't far above Bai Zihu's, but it is definitely still higher than mine. Hua Jiyue looked at the somewhat confused Lin Shi, and then narrowed her eyes, explaining, look at the wound on that Wolverine's leg. Even with my cultivation, if that Wolverine was already injured to this degree by me, just how many steps can it continue running for? Could it be that they would let it run free, right up to these medicine department people's faces? Lin Shi immediately turned around. With just a single look at the sword wound on that already skinned Wolverine's leg, he understood what Hua Jiyue was saying. You aren't my match. What about you? Or perhaps we should switch to someone else. Right at this time, Lu Pingjiang already gave Bai Zihu a look, and then he looked at Lu Ziyu, coldly and arrogantly saying this. This one is Green Luan Academy Medicine Department's new student, Lu Ziyu. The inwardly slightly chilled Lu Ziyu reached out his hand, pulling out the wooden spear Bai Zihu and the others stabbed into the ground, and then walked forward, making a come gesture towards Lu Pingjiang. He understood Bai Zihu's cultivation and strength extremely well, also clearly understanding that not even he himself would necessarily be able to continuously force back Bai Zihu in such a clean manner. Moreover, judging from the exchange just now, the other party overwhelmed Bai Zihu completely with strength. The other party's soul force cultivation might still be higher than his own, which was why Lu Ziyu felt that with a weapon, his chances of victory might be a bit higher than with his bare hands. After all, in the training valley, they always fought with weapons. When he saw Lu Ziyu approach with a spear, Lu Pingjiang seemed to have seen through his thoughts. A hint of mockery flashed past his eyes. He also removed the wooden blade hanging from his waist, brandishing his blade towards Lu Ziyu, at the same time saying with a stern voice, Thunder Academy's first-year new student, Lu Pingjiang. Lu Ziyu didn't say anything else either, only nodding slightly. Then, his knees bent slightly, the tip of his feet continuously tapping on the ground. The distance between the two was immediately pulled close, the sharp wooden spear, following his body's movements, stabbed at Lu Pingjiang's throat with a strange trajectory. Neither side had Green Luan Academy's black armor protecting them. With the wooden spear's sharpness, if one was struck, then it would be enough to pierce through Lu Pingjiang's body. However, when faced with the screaming sharp spear, Lu Pingjiang didn't move at all, as if he didn't feel a trace of worry. Lu Ziyu couldn't help but hesitate a bit. However, right in this moment of sluggishness, with a ha shout, Lu Pingjiang held his blade with 2 hands, exhaling, bringing it smashing down. It was just one blade. With a thunk sound, the wooden spear in Lu Ziyu's hands was knocked to the ground. Lu Pingjiang took a step forward, brandishing his blade again. Lu Ziyu lost his spear, now quickly backing up. Lu Pingjiang didn't stop, swiftly chasing after him, swinging the blade. You are a cheater. The now extremely ugly-faced Lu Ziyu screamed out. Pa! The wooden blade hacked into Lu Ziyu's right arm. Lu Ziyu's body buckled, and then soon afterwards, he rolled out on his own. Lu Pingjiang withdrew his blade, saying with a cold laugh, it was you yourself who didn't dare. Did you think that if you didn't have any hesitation, I wouldn't be able to avoid that thrust? Roar! Lu Ziyu's face was snow-white, charging at Lu Pingjiang like a mad tiger. Pa! The wooden blade smashed into his neck with incomparable precision, and then an alarming thick, bloody wound quickly appeared on his fine neck. Lu Ziyu wanted to take a step forward, but almost all of the blood in his brain seemed to have been immediately sucked dry. His entire body lacked strength, kneeling weakly not far in front of Lu Pingjiang. He wanted to say something, but his hands were on his throat, momentarily unable to breathe, unable to display any sound. The wide-forehead leader of the Thunder Academy students calmly and coldly swept his eyes over the kneeling Lu Ziyu, once again spitting out those 4 words. Nothing more than this. Chapter Volume 330. I think it's best if I go. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Piangjing didn't even give Lu Ziyu another look. He walked past his body, heading towards the Wolverine hanging over the bonfire. Bai Zihu and the other 2 medicine department students' faces were extremely pale. If this was on the battlefield, once Lu Ziyu fell, the 3 of them might still throw themselves over. However, this was a contest between the 2 academy students. The other party's strength and arrogance allowed them to clearly understand that they are not this Thunder Academy student's opponent at all, that they would only bring even greater shame to Green One Academy. Lu Pingjiang looked at Bai Zihu and the others who were shaking slightly from unwillingness, the expression of ridicule in his eyes becoming stronger and stronger. For himself and the other Thunder Academy students, these Green One Academy students, even though they were hot-blooded, they really were a bit too tender and immature. In addition, because the opponents were Green One Academy students, that was why after winning, there was even more of a sense of thrill. Lu Pingjiang even felt as if his blood was flowing a bit faster than normal, his condition extremely great. I'll go. While watching Lu Pingjiang get closer and closer to the bonfire, Hua Jiyue and Qin Siya almost spoke at the same time. Their cultivation and strength weren't necessarily higher than Lu Ziyu's, especially that of Hua Jiyue, who saw through the other party's schemes right from the start. However, in this type of situation, neither of them wished to see that Wolverine seized so easily before their eyes. Lu Pingjiang's step stopped. He turned around, looking at Hua Jiyue and Qin Siya. These 2 Green One Academy female students both had the word moon in their names, but regardless of whether it was their appearance or temperament, there was a huge difference. The 2 didn't expect the other party to speak up at the same time either. After exchanging a look, they then couldn't help but clench their teeth, both of them repeating, I will go. No, I think it's best if I go. However, right at this time, a voice that left these 2 girls stupefied sounded. They couldn't help but turn around. The one who spoke was Lin Shi. You. Hua Jiyue's first reaction was frowning deeply, but before she could say anything, Qin Siya already shook her head firmly, saying coldly, no, you cannot. Lin Shi naturally understood Qin Siya's intentions. Bai Zihu already lost and Lu Ziyu was also still on the ground, not getting up yet. This was related to the dignity of the academy, it was not the time to be bold for no reason. However, he only looked at Qin Siya, suddenly reaching out a hand, patting her shoulder, at the same time lightly saying, didn't you want me to prove myself to you? I can give you proof right now. Suddenly patting the shoulders of a female, in Yun Qin, was extremely rude, but Qin Siya didn't seem to be annoyed in the slightest. Instead, her body was filled with a wave of shock, her beautiful eyes widening in a bit of disbelief. Even though the way Lin Shi patted her shoulder was gentle, it felt as if there was a huge boulder crushing down on her body. Even though she couldn't understand just how great this power was exactly, what she knew for certain, was that Lin Shi's strength was far above 90 Jin. Moreover, what left her even more shocked was that apart from Lin Shi's calm tone and strong confidence, there was still Jiang Xiaoyi at their side. This natural arts department student didn't seem to carry any sense of shame from the very start. When he heard Lin Shi say he was going, he even more so said happily with approval, let him go. Qin Siya's brows furrowed even more tightly, but when she saw Lin Shi and Jiang Xiaoyi's expressions, she instead didn't try to oppose this any further. Lin Shi nodded towards her, not saying anything either. He began to walk, moving towards Lu Pingjiang. His calm and confident expression made Lu Pingjiang and that wide forehead Lightning Academy students' brows jump slightly. No. How can you all let this trash go out to fight? Right at this time, what no one expected was that Lu Ziyu, who had finally stood back up from the ground with great difficulty, struggling to even speak, instead roared out, "Even if everyone in our Green One Academy died, we still definitely can't let this shameful piece of trash represent us." This place became momentarily silent. All of Thunder Academy's students were stunned. Because of the humiliation he was feeling and, because of his anger, Lu Ziyu's normally handsome appearance looked sinister, his eyes even more so becoming blood red, like a wounded wild beast. While looking at the slightly frowning Lin Shi, with a strange and hoarse voice, he once more screamed out, "Don't tell me that you all wish to lose even more face for our academy because of this type of trash." Jiang Xiaoyi's face completely sunk. If they were talking about losing face, Lu Ziyu was struck until he knelt before his opponent. This is true humiliation. However, Lu Ziyu's shame and anger were instead shifted to Lin Shi's body. Jiang Xiaoyi could not tolerate this. He took a step forward, about to erupt into curses, but as soon as he opened his mouth, there was no sound that came out. It was because at this time, Lin Shi only made an extremely simple gesture. He only proficiently removed the simple and crude bow on his body, and then fired an arrow at Lu Ziyu in an extremely simple manner. This arrow passed through the gap between Lu Ziyu's legs, entering the weeds behind Lu Ziyu. At this time, this hilly region became even more quiet. Lu Ziyu's hoarse shouting also came to an abrupt stop. He lowered his head with disbelief, as if he didn't dare believe Lin Shi actually dared to shoot an arrow in his direction, moreover in disbelief that Lin Shi's arrow actually passed through the gap between his legs with incomparable precision. Even though this hardwood bow was simple and crude, the arrows were extremely sharp and tough. If they landed on one's body, they would definitely leave behind a deep bloody hole. Lu Pingjiang and the wide forehead Thunder Academy students' eyes became a bit cold. Lin Shi's arrow and his archery skill weren't even the most shocking thing. The most astonishing thing was his calmness and steadiness. Even though they didn't know anything about Lin Shi, all of the Thunder Academy students could still sense the difference between Lin Shi and people like Lu Ziyu. After firing this arrow without wasting a single word, Lin Shi didn't look at Lu Ziyu either. He placed the bow and arrow on the ground, and then pulled out a wooden spear from his side, heading towards Lu Pingjiang. He forcefully broke the wooden spear, testing out this broken spear that was now the length of a long sword, a somewhat satisfied expression appearing on his face. Lu Ziyu still wanted to say something, but he was instead interrupted by Lu Pingjiang. Lu Pingjiang watched as Lin Shi calmly walked over, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Your archery skills are quite excellent. It isn't all that special, but if I was hidden and ambushed you, it should be quite difficult for you to evade. However, if I won like this, you definitely won't be convinced, so I can't use the bow." Lin Shi looked at this high cheekboned, outwardly grave-looking Thunder Academy student, saying with a nod, "Please." Lu Pingjiang didn't say any more either. He held the wooden blade in hand, giving Lin Shi a "come" gesture. Lin Shi only nodded. Immediately afterwards, his entire figure suddenly accelerated, moving up the inclined slope, charging with astonishing force. Grass and earth flew out from behind him. Lu Pingjiang's left leg took half a step backwards, but his body instead leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. His entire body completed its preparations for engaging Lin Shi. In an instant, Lin Shi was already not far from him. Pang! Lin Shi's right leg stamped heavily into the ground, causing waves of heat to erupt. There was suddenly a depression that appeared on the study hillside's earth. Lu Pingjiang's entire body immediately went taut, like a bow that was tightened to the extreme. However, what caused him to can't help but become a bit sluggish, was that Lin Shi's following attack actually didn't immediately arrive. It was just like a wave that already reached its greatest height, but didn't come back down. Meanwhile, precisely during this moment of sluggishness, Lin Shi instead already truly exerted force. A wave of vortex-like power surged from his feet, passing through his body, his arms, all the way into the sword-like wooden spear in his hands. Lin Shi drew his sword, and then hacked out. These movements that Lin Shi had already practiced who knew how many times, under the full support of Lin Shi's soul force, in a situation where he was in peak condition, appeared even more perfect and explosive. Kill. The moment Lu Pingjiang's pupils contracted, the wooden blade in his hands hacked out. However, when his wooden blade only traveled halfway out, it lost the power to continue. Lin Shi's wooden spear already stabbed heavily into his right shoulder. A painful muffled groan sounded. Lu Pingjiang directly tumbled backwards, rolling more than 10 meters out. Meanwhile, Lin Shi instead stood in place, not chasing after him, only watching as Lu Pingjiang rolled further and further. He was extremely excited inwardly, but his face was still calm. You lost. Lu Pingjiang's expression was extremely ugly. After remaining silent for a moment, he nodded. I lost. The part Lin Shi stabbed into his body was only the blunt end of the wooden spear. This meant that Lin Shi was already going easy on his opponent, but despite this being the case, the power of this wooden spear still inflicted shattering pain. He was completely relying on his extreme willpower to barely hold the wooden blade. Continuing the battle was already impossible. Victory was victory, defeat was defeat. Even if only Lin Shi himself knew that this was the result of using Spirit Vulture's trick from the Training Valley and his Brave Slayer special training, his victory earned rather treacherously. In the eyes of others, Lin Shi only hacked out once, yet already struck down Lu Pingjiang, and then Lu Pingjiang lost. Lin Shi's blow was incredibly fierce and vicious, and it also directly stabbed into Qin Siye and Lu Ziyu's bodies. Qin Siye clutched her mouth. When Lin Shi struck out, her eyes became incomparably bright, but when that strike landed on Lu Pingjiang's body, her hand clutched her mouth in disbelief, a sense of humiliation and guilt filling her mind. She understood that she really was wrong. Everyone knew that Lin Shi didn't have any sense of shame when facing the 90 Gene Heaven's choice mockery, but he really just felt that it was beneath him to argue with them. BL.net, this brat was actually this formidable. Hua Jiyue mumbled with a bit of annoyance. Meanwhile, Lu Ziyu's expression became even more pale than before, his entire body shaking, unable to release any sound. Why is he? Bai Zihu and the other 2 medicine department students felt as if their souls left their bodies. It was unknown just how many times they mocked Lin Shi in private, yet only now did they discover that Lu Ziyu and all of them were the ones who are the real targets of ridicule. How is this possible? Mu Shanzi, who originally didn't say anything, preparing to watch Lin Shi make a fool of himself, was also completely stunned. He could also tell just what kind of strength was behind Lin Shi's strike from the cold sweat that continuously poured out from Lu Pingjiang's forehead and that twitching arm. You actually had this type of cultivation. Why didn't you defend yourself? Suddenly, Lu Ziyu looked at Lin Shi, roaring out. Lin Shi turned around, looking at Lu Ziyu with a strange expression. I believe you should still remember our agreement, since you've annoyed me to the point where I don't even want to look at you. Who are you to me? Why do I have to waste my time explaining myself to you? Lu Ziyu's body suddenly swayed. Lin Shi's words were simply like a slap to his face, but this slap was completely brought about by himself. The 2 of them made an agreement, but right now, this agreement already completely lacked meaning, because he wasn't Lu Pingjiang's opponent, while Lu Pingjiang was struck down by a single blow from Lin Shi. Moreover, when faced with their previous mockery and blame, Lin Shi's temper was already extremely good. 2 more medicine department students appeared on a mound not far out, precisely Gao Yanan and Jiang Yuer. What is your name? Meanwhile, right at this time, from within Thunder Academy's students, the wide-forehead student walked over, looking at Lin Shi and seriously asking. Lin Shi didn't reply, instead also looking at this student, replying with a question, and what is your name? This wide-forehead Thunder Academy student's brows jumped in a bit of annoyance, but he still replied, Thunder Academy first-year new student, Wan Yen Mai. 1. You. Chapter Volume 331. You won't understand even if I tell you you are listening at novelfull.audio. Self-Defense Department first-year student Lin Shi. Lin Shi replied. Then, he looked at this Thunder Academy student who was previously domineering, asking, a wolverine with such a huge hole in its leg could still run so far from your face. Wan Yen Mai understood the meaning behind Lin Shi's sudden question, but the expression on his face didn't change at all. He said indifferently, when one is hungry for too long, there isn't much strength left to give chase, so it can run a bit further. Lin Shi looked at him, saying, even if I am extremely hungry, I still won't let food run too far. Wan Yen Mai curled his lips, laughing and saying, then perhaps it is brother Lin who is talented. Lin Shi gave Wan Yen Mai a look, and said, these words are quite shameless. Could it be that all Thunder Academy students are this shameless? Wan Yen Mai didn't get angry, calmly replying, regardless of whether we are shameless or not, in the end, we still have to speak with strength. Then this is undisguised shamelessness. Lin Shi gave Wan Yen Mai a look. Do you want to fight against me? Wan Yen Mai smiled and said, perhaps you might be the most formidable among these people, but Lu Pingjiang isn't the best of us. Even though I don't know what motives you all have, we are only properly doing our coursework here. Lin Shi shook his head, and then said, what benefits does fighting you bring me? Even if I win against you, what if more people come to our Green One Academy, looking for trouble? All of our stamina has to be focused on searching for food, and not used to waste on pointless battles. Wan Yen Mai frowned. He looked directly at Lin Shi. You don't seem to have much of a heart for honor and glory. Lin Shi gave Wan Yen Mai a somewhat speechless look. You guys really know how to taunt shamelessly. Just like how you feel that I am the most formidable here, that is only what you've assumed. I can promise you that if you come honorably to Green One Academy to challenge us, you will definitely be beaten up into a fool. What you say has some reasoning. Wan Yen Mai looked at Lin Shi, his tone starting to clearly become more domineering, however, you have also made me more and more interested in facing you. Don't you want some benefits? As long as you can win against me, then that wolverine is yours, all of the remaining food on us is also yours. Also, I can promise you that there won't be any more Thunder Academy students who will trouble you all here. Lin Shi gave Wan Yen Mai a look, saying, I'm actually more interested in why you all came to Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. Wan Yen Mai shook his head. I cannot comment on that. Come then. Lin Shi muttered a bit to himself, and then he made a come motion towards this opponent. He also picked up the broken spear with his left hand as well. Wan Yen Mai was completely surprised. Just this straightforward, Lin Shi nodded. The food you all have on you isn't something I can refuse. Fine. Wan Yen Mai laughed loudly, and then he didn't say anything either. With a swing of his sleeve, he removed a large wooden blade from his waist. Without any unnecessary movements, he directly took more than 10 steps forward, bringing his weapon down on Lin Shi's head. Pa! When the wooden blade moved, the air in front of the blade released a light exploding noise. The face of Qin Siya, who originally felt great shock towards Lin Shi's strength, inwardly filled with guilt, immediately changed greatly. Just this blade brandishing power already released an exploding sound in the air. The power of this blade was definitely extremely shocking. Wan Yen Mai's cultivation was definitely far above mid-level Soul Knight. This heavy wooden sheet, in the eyes of Qin Siya and others was a blade, but in Lin Shi's eyes, it was like a suddenly descending mountain. Lin Shi could not evade, so he could only twist his body and brandish his blade. Pa! The crazy wave of power that was produced from the tough spear in his hands and the thick wood sheet released an explosive noise. This wave of power completely exceeding his own sent his right hand and the broken spear sword flying out. However, the moment his figure began to fall slightly, the shorter part of the spear in his left hand also stabbed out like a blade, aimed right at Wan Yen Mai's face. Wang Yanmai remained extremely calm. He only slightly lowered his body, and then easily avoided this attack. At the same time, he already took a step out, reading another blow. The thick wooden sheet once again collided with the broken spear sword in Lin Shi's right hand. Lin Shi's body leaned greatly to the side, as if he already completely lost his center of gravity. However, his steps were shockingly stable. With a fierce step, he avoided Wang Yanmai's treacherous kick which was aimed upwards. Wang Yanmai's kick already reached Lin Shi's chest in height, but his movements didn't stop in the slightest, his entire leg still straight, chopping down onto the ground like a great axe. Among the martial skills, this type of leg technique was originally called high leg cleave, a following move after a kick was already made into the air, used to strike the opponent's head or shoulder. However, this foot smashed fiercely into the ground, and then his body rose into the air like a saw, at the same time brandishing his blade once more. All of this was extremely clear. It looked slow, but the speed was extremely fast. When Lin Shi's step had just touched the ground, he already arrived in front of Lin Shi. This blade was swung horizontally, smashing tyrannically at Lin Shi's waist. Lin Shi didn't have any time to evade. With a twist of his body, the two broken spear parts intersected, forcibly blocking this blade. An explosive pause sounded. While Lin Shi's entire body shook, Wang Yanmai already locked in on him. His entire body arched forward, like an old bear ramming into a tree, his shoulder immediately sent Lin Shi's body flying. Ah! Jiang Xiaoyi, Qin Siya and the others couldn't help but release a cry of alarm. The wooden blade in Wang Yanmai's hands already brandished outwards. Lin Shi was in the air, but his sense of balance still hadn't been lost. The short spear in his right hand still hacked out with incredible precision, blocking in front of this wooden blade. Excellent! Wang Yanmai spoke a sincere word of praise. However, this blade, with a twist of his wrist, instead became an upward thrust. This upward thrust seemed like it had struck a jumping large fish, making Lin Shi's body flip in the air. Lin Shi now had his back towards him. At the same time, his foot stepped out, kicking against Lin Shi's left shoulder blade, sending him flying outwards, crashing heavily into the ground. Jiang Xiaoyi and Qin Siya's expressions immediately became snow-white. Lin Shi's fighting prowess already exceeded everyone's expectations, but the opponent was too domineering, his strength far greater than Lin Shi's. Just from the very first blade that lacked all tricks, he already seized the advantage. These following strikes were all powerful and direct, exceptionally tyrannical. Forget about the kick that was definitely enough to prevent Lin Shi's entire left part of his face from moving. Even if Lin Shi could fight again, there wouldn't be any chances. Your skill isn't bad. Unfortunately, your cultivation level is a bit too low. Wang Yanmai held the wooden blade steadily, shaking his head extremely domineeringly. You aren't my match. Lin Shi didn't reply. Don't tell me he fainted. Wang Yanmai, who didn't receive any reply for quite some time, was a bit surprised. Lin Shi, are you okay? Meng Bai panicked, hurriedly running towards Lin Shi, wishing to pick him up. Don't touch me. Ah, this hurts so much. However, Lin Shi instead suddenly said this. Wang Yanmai and the other Thunder Academy students immediately revealed a bit of a sneer. All of them couldn't help but shake their heads, thinking that this person really didn't have much of a heart of glory. Wang Yanmai, I thought about it for a bit. I still think I have a chance of defeating you. Right at this time, Lin Shi's voice sounded again. This made Qin Siya and the others who weren't far off, and even Gao Yanan who was about to speak out, become a bit stunned. Oh! Wang Yanmai was momentarily distracted, but immediately afterwards, he laughed in a brash manner. Tell me what you think then. Forget it, even though there are some things I don't really feel like saying again, I don't want to hear anything else that'll make my friends become angry. Lin Shi said another line that left others confused. Then, he spoke another word. Return. Under the familiar change of scenery, Lin Shi once again returned to 10 minutes ago. Right now, Lu Ziyu and Lu Pingjiang still hadn't fought yet. As such, Lin Shi just waited for Lu Ziyu to lose, and then pressed down on Qin Siya's shoulder. He then fired an arrow, repeated the same words he said before, then waited for the Wanyanmai to remove the large wooden blade at his waist. Pa! Pa! Compared to last time, in the beginning, Lin Shi didn't change anything from before at all. Under two muffled explosive sounds, Lin Shi was sent flying backwards by Wanyanmai. Then, Wanyanmai's right leg hacked down towards the ground again like a great axe, his entire body springing out. He brandished his blade, sending it smashing down. His body pressed ahead, rushing forward, sending Lin Shi's entire body flying again. Ah! Jiang Xiaoyi, Qin Siya, and the others didn't know that this had already happened to Lin Shi once. They released a cry of alarm at the same time. Meanwhile, the wooden blade in Wanyanmai's hands already changed into an upward thrust motion, directly spinning Lin Shi in midair. Then, Wanyanmai's foot fiercely stomped at Lin Shi's left shoulder blade. His movements were still clear and terrifying, every single move clean and powerful. He watched as Lin Shi was going to be kicked flying once again, but what made even Gao Yanan couldn't help but release a light cry of surprise, was that the short spear in his right arm instead pierced out from his left underarm, stabbing at Wanyanmai's soul with incredible precision. There were no words to describe Lin Shi's current strike. The Thunder Academy students whose faces already produced knowing smiles immediately froze. Lin Shi's strike not only seemed like he had eyes on his back, his choice of timing to make his move was also extremely terrifying, as if he already knew what Wanyanmai was thinking beforehand. In this instant, it was as if Wanyanmai was the one who chose to ram the sole of his foot into the wooden spear in Lin Shi's hand. Wanyanmai himself couldn't react in time at all, unable to evade. Pooh! The wooden spear stabbed fiercely into the bottom of his foot, releasing a muffled noise. Ah! An unsuppressible cry of pain erupted from his throat, his entire figure buckling in the air. He didn't dare land with this foot. When he landed on his other foot, his figure was unsteady, sitting down on the ground. Meanwhile, Lin Shi, who also fell down, supported himself with one hand, instead standing steadily. This barren wasteland where who knew how many weeds grew became quiet once more, only heavy breathing sounds and the noise of wind blowing around some weeds audible. Lin Shi stood in the knee-high weeds. His right arm was continuously shaking, the space between his thumb and index finger cracked, traces of blood visible. The broken spear sword in his right hand had already snapped as well, revealing jagged wooden pricks, barely holding itself together and not separating into two pieces. His figure looked rather bleak, but when it was set off by the pale faces of the extremely arrogant Thunder Academy students, he instead seemed incomparably lofty. Chapter Volume 332. Chat back there. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Ziyu's expression was more pale than anyone else's, to the extent where the blood-red mark on his neck was exceptionally red. Just how did he do it? How could he possibly accomplish this? Just now, just from Wanyanmai's seemingly clear and slow, but instead incredibly swift, suffocatingly powerful and domineering way of attacking, he knew that there was no way he could face Wanyanmai, perhaps not even able to block a second blade from him. However, this type of opponent actually lost under Lin Shi's hands. When he thought about how overbearing he was towards Lin Shi before, about his own agreement with Lin Shi, he immediately felt as if he couldn't breathe. With an ah cry, he actually directly fell backwards, fainting. Just how did he do this? Qin Siya's beautiful eyes were also completely widened, indescribable shock completely overwhelming her previous feeling of guilt. Lin Shi's usual calmness, which she previously loathed, now produced the most powerful impact in her eyes. That wasn't naughtiness at all, but rather true confidence and modesty. Why was it that when he couldn't even see the other party's movements, he could still make such a decision, stab straight at Wanyanmai's soul? This had nothing to do with martial skill, strength, or courage. Even if he had eyes on his back, there was no way he could react in time. However, Lin Shi managed to do it, moreover to the extent where Wang Yanmai didn't even have the time to retract his foot. There wasn't a single person here who wasn't baffled, even Jiang Xiaoyi, who had already seen many ridiculous performances from Lin Shi. When he saw Lin Shi defeat such a powerful opponent, he was shaking all over from excitement. This was precisely the strength of a brave slayer. This was the brave slayer who was destined to become a hero. However, these were things he naturally couldn't speak out loud, so he had to bitterly suppress himself, his expression instead becoming incredibly strange. The part Lin Shi used to stab the sole of Wang Yanmai's foot with was still the blunt end of the broken spear, but Wang Yanmai couldn't stand steadily at all, sitting down. Everyone naturally already completely understood who the victor of this battle was. However, when even Lu Ziyu felt that Lin Shi had already acquired victory, fainting from humiliation and anger, Wang Yanmai, who stood back up, instead looked at Lin Shi, raising the wooden blade in his hand again, saying with a sunken voice, "Again." This place immediately erupted into commotion. Even the most timid and cowardly Meng Bai and Jiang Yuer's faces turned white from anger, reaching out their fingers and pointing at Wang Yanmai. "You're shameless." Lin Shi was also stunned. Even though he had to use his ability to know about the other party's kick, and he had to think for a long time before feeling that this kick was the only chance in a fight between Wang Yanmai and himself, now that he seized this opportunity, reality was that Wang Yanmai already lost. "Do you have any sense of shame?" Qin Siye was also angered until her entire body was shaking slightly. Moreover, her jade-like face seemed to be covered under a layer of frost as she stared rigidly at Wang Yanmai, saying, "You should also clearly understand that if everyone used true weapons, there'd already be a bloody hole in your foot." Wang Yanmai gave Qin Siye a look, his expression unchanged as he said, "Even if there is a bloody hole, I will still have the strength to fight." If this was a true battlefield, could it be that you cannot keep fighting just because you have a bloody hole in your foot? Lin Shi looked at Wang Yanmai with a completely speechless expression, saying in a distracted manner, "I did call you shameless before, but I never expected you to actually be shameless to this degree, actually saying even this type of words in such a confident manner. Before we fought, I already said that even if everyone is shameless, in the end, strength is the deciding factor. The current situation is that you believe I have lost, but I can't accept it." Wang Yanmai still looked at Lin Shi domineeringly. "If you really can defeat me, then if you could knock me down once, you can knock me down again. Moreover, let me offer you a piece of advice. On the battlefield, you should never give your opponent the chance to crawl back up." After all of this, not only did he not admit defeat, he instead began to lecture Lin Shi. Qin Siye was simply angered to the point of going silly. She grabbed Lin Shi's sleeve, saying, "Lin Shi, don't pay him any attention. If he continues to insist on this, we'll just call some more people over, beat him up until he can't crawl back up. Even then, I will seize Lin Shi and fight him." Wang Yanmai didn't pay this any attention, making a "come" gesture towards Lin Shi again. How can one be shameless to this degree? Qin Siye didn't realize that her action of tugging on Lin Shi's sleeves looked rather intimate at all, only this thought filling her mind. However, she knew that she wasn't Wang Yanmai's opponent, so even though she was angered to the point of shaking all over, there was still nothing she could do to Wang Yanmai. Ever since Gao Yanan walked over to Hua Jiyue and Meng Bai's side with Jiang Yuer, she only quietly watched. When she heard this, her brows furrowed tightly. She walked towards Wang Yanmai, then pointed at the mound behind Wang Yanmai and the others, saying to him, "Little mister, let's go and have a chat over there." Qin Siye turned around, seeing Gao Yanan step out. She couldn't help but become stunned, Lin Shi also staring blankly, not knowing what the intention behind Gao Yanan's words was. The one who was the most stunned was Wang Yanmai. He looked at this tall and slender, young and moving Green One Academy female student, saying with a sunken voice, "What are you trying to say? Won't you find out once you follow me?" Gao Yanan directly walked past him, leaving behind some words. "If you come with me to have a chat, then I can let you fight with him again, but if you don't dare, then forget it, you're less than even a girl. Wang Yanmai's brows furrowed deeply. He didn't say anything else either, turning around and following her. Lin Shi and the others, don't follow me. What made Lin Shi's brows furrow deeply was that Gao Yanan didn't turn around, instead waving her hand, adding this. What exactly did you want to discuss with me? When he climbed over the hill with Gao Yanan, saw that the line of sight behind them was already covered, no way they could hear their conversation either, Wang Yanmai stopped. He looked at this pretty, but rather strange Green One Academy female student. Nothing much. Gao Yanan looked around her, and then at Wang Yanmai, saying, I just found you too annoying, so I wanted to beat the crap out of you without anyone else looking. Beat the crap out of me. When he saw the tall and slender Gao Yanan, Wang Yanmai became stunned again, producing an extremely strange feeling. However, Gao Yanan instead didn't want to waste any words, directly pressing towards Wang Yanmai, unarmed and defenseless. She suddenly accelerated, her body like an arrow that left a bowstring, also directly charging at Wang Yanmai. Wang Yanmai's expression suddenly became serious, leaning to the side, sending a fist smashing towards Gao Yanan in an extremely direct manner. Even though he felt like this matter was extremely absurd, when faced with an attacking Green One Academy student, he naturally wouldn't stand there and let himself get hit. Pa! Gao Yanan reached out a hand like a blade, bringing it smashing down on Wang Yanmai's fist. Wang Yanmai's face immediately changed, the feeling of absurdity becoming even greater, in disbelief. His arms suddenly became numb, his fist even more so, in so much pain that it felt like it was splitting open, losing all feeling. The shocking force made his entire body continuously back up, deep footprints appearing in the ground one after another. This seemingly soft and gentle, tall and slender Green One Academy female student, her cultivation, her strength, was actually far above his own. In his line of sight, Gao Yanan's body flew outwards, and then another palm pressed towards his chest. Her expression was still extremely calm, as if she was just doing something routine and insignificant, but this type of attitude was exceptionally terrifying in Wang Yanmai's eyes. His face suddenly turned pale, his left arm that could still move suddenly drawing his blade, hacking towards the incoming Gao Yanan. However, what made his breathing completely stop was that Gao Yanan's hand blade only drew out an arc, and then the wooden blade felt as if it was rammed into by a tree, flying from his hands completely out of control. Pa! A muffled sound rang out from his chest. Gao Yanan's other hand landed on his chest. His two legs suddenly buckled, a wave of bloodiness and intense pain surging from within his body. An expression of horror and pain flashed past his eyes. As soon as he opened his mouth, an unsuppressible cry of pain sounded, but right at this moment, Gao Yanan's light fist struck his throat. This seemingly soft fist directly stuffed up his cry of pain. His face immediately turned purple, powerlessly falling backwards. What exactly does Gao Yanan want to do? Lin Shi, Qin Xie and the others all looked towards that earth mound not far away. Right when Lin Shi felt like he couldn't wait anymore, wanting to head over to take a look, actually not much time had passed at all, Gao Yanan and Wang Yanmai's figures appeared again. In front of Gao Yanan, was a somewhat hobbling Wang Yanmai. What happened? The two sides both asked their side's person. Gao Yanan's reply was extremely simple. I just had an argument with him. He admitted that he lost, saying that he'll leave all of the food he has with us, and then he'll immediately leave. Wang Yanmai remained silent the entire time, from time to time opening his mouth, but didn't say anything. Only, his expression was a bit unnatural. Brother Wang Yan, what is the meaning of this? You have to at least speak up to let us know what exactly is going on. Are you going to remain quiet like this, make us leave behind all of our food? A Thunder Academy student with a green mark on his face, after not replying after asking several times, instead became impatient, unable to hold back a shout of anger. Could it be that this woman made you drink some bewitching water? Little mister over there. The eyebrows of Gao Yanan, who was already standing still, jumped. She looked at this Thunder Academy student, saying, "Let's head over there and have a chat." "Sure, I want to see what is going on for myself." This Thunder Academy student responded fiercely, giving Gao Yanen a stare, and then headed towards that earth mountain. "You all, don't come." Gao Yanen waved her small white hand again. When he saw Gao Yanen and that Thunder Academy student make their way behind the earth mound, Wang Yan might originally moved, wishing to do something, but when Gao Yanen passed his side, gave him an indifferent look, his face twitched slightly, not daring to move at all. "What do you want to discuss?" "Nothing much, just wanted to beat you up." Behind the mound, this little mister saw Gao Yanen's palm fly at him, and then his arms that defended himself felt as if he had been rammed into a carriage. Only now did this Thunder Academy student with the green mark on his face understand what the "let's discuss over there" meant. Chapter Volume 333. I hate trouble the most. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gao Yanen and that Thunder Academy student with the green mark on his face quickly appeared from behind the mound. When he saw Gao Yanen who was in the front, the corners of Wang Yanmai's mouth twitched again. Towards his own cultivation, he originally had extreme confidence. Before he entered Thunder Academy, he was already a cultivator, and his cultivation had already crossed the mid-level Soul Knight doorstep. Now, he even more so already had high-level Soul Knight cultivation. Yinqin's 3 academies never lacked cultivation geniuses. At Wang Yanmai's age, reaching high-level Soul Knight cultivation already made him a true cultivation genius. That was why he indeed didn't really place these Green One Academy students in his eyes. However, what he never expected was that he would continuously encounter freaks here. Lin Shi clearly had around mid-level Soul Knight cultivation, a huge difference in strength between the two, yet under that type of situation, he could actually stab the sole of his foot. What he said about a battle not ending on the battlefield until one side was dead, requiring the continuation of the battle, was indeed extremely shameless. It was because even on the true battlefield, if there was a bloody hole that was opened in his foot, Lin Shi wouldn't have to pay him any attention, because even if he ran, there was no way he could catch up. After losing too much blood, his body would definitely become weaker and weaker. A high-level Soul Knight was defeated with only mid-level Soul Knight cultivation, moreover a high-level Soul Knight who had experienced true tempering, not a pampered and spoiled flower. Lin Shi really was a freak. Meanwhile, the following Gao Yanen was also a freak, her strength actually at a level where he couldn't retaliate at all, her strength impossible for him to even block. His cultivation was already at high-level Soul Knight, so did Gao Yanen's cultivation already reach Soul Expert level. Ever since he came into contact with cultivation, Wang Yanmai already knew that in this world, apart from Green One Academy's Clear Truth Pill and the West's powerful Tongcang Ancient Country's Spirit Wisdom Pill, there weren't any other pill medicines or methods to help one cross the dividing line of sensing one's own soul force. Meanwhile, these 2 pill medicines were both special goods, not even Central Province Imperial City's influential officials could obtain them. Together with one's spirit and soul force being weaker when one was young, even more difficult to sense soul force, even if one started cultivating from a young age, they were all just wasting their time, really difficult for them to truly become cultivators. For him to have already achieved high-level Soul Knight cultivation at 16 to 17 years of age, this was already an extremely astonishing feat. That was why that day, that expert from Great Mang's Holy Land Purgatory Mountain who showed up outside Rudong City, when he discovered Nangong Weiyang's cultivation, only then was he inwardly filled with mockery, feeling like it was unreasonably absurd, thus falling into the earth, passing away while filled with disappointment and frustration. There were indeed some freaks in this world, to the extent where there were some who were aware of their soul force from ever since they could remember, naturally joining the ranks of cultivators. However, these types of freaks were naturally extremely rare. Soul expert level cultivation, perhaps only Brother Heelan could deal with her. Originally, when he arrived at Heaven Ascension Mountain Range, Wang Yanmai already felt that he could easily bring down Green One Academy's prestige, but with the appearance of Lin Shi and Gao Yanen, these 2 freaks, it instead completely overturned his way of thinking. The Thunder Academy student with the green mark on his face, Jian Yong, had similar strength to himself, but now, he was walking with his head hung behind Gao Yanan. Even without asking, he knew the result of his and Gao Yanan's chat. Moreover, even if he asked, he might not even get a reply, because right now, he was just like himself, beaten until his throat was swelling, unable to speak. Yanan, what exactly is going on? Lin Shi's side naturally weren't idiots either, from the extremely ugly expressions on Wan Yanmai and the miserable-looking Jian Yong's faces, they had a vague idea that he was most likely taught a lesson by Gao Yanan. Could it be that Gao Yanan's strength is much more astonishing than even this Wan Yanmai's? Qin Siya stared blankly at the still easygoing Gao Yanan, once again feeling like there were many things that weren't quite like how she imagined them to be. Jian Yong returned to Thunder Academy's group, directly leaving all of the food he carried behind before turning around to leave. The other Thunder Academy students also finally read and understood Wan Yanmai and Jian Yong's expressions, removing all of the food they carried, and then turning around to leave. These Thunder Academy students came in a bossy and domineering manner, but they were extremely quiet when they left, full of shame. A rather strange dispute concluded. The eyes with which Bai Zihu and the others looked at Lin Shi suddenly underwent a subtle change, their emotions extremely complicated. They didn't know what to say, what to do. How did you discipline them? Not only did they become completely convinced, you even made them completely shut their mouths. Lin Shi didn't care about the eyes of others, instead looking at Gao Yanan, extremely curious, quietly asking, either way, you already took action. Why do you still have to go through the trouble of going behind that hill? Gao Yanan looked at Lin Shi, shaking her head and saying, I don't want to lie to you. All right. Lin Shi stared blankly, and then he nodded. However, his brows were furrowed tightly. Gao Yanan's words, I don't want to lie to you, might not be clear to others around them, but Lin Shi understood the meaning of this line well. Could it be that her taking action would expose some of her secrets? If this was true, then Gao Yanan's identity and background might not be that simple either. Lin Shi, what you said wasn't wrong. Our previous criticism was founded on things we didn't personally see, only founded on our own unreasonable assumptions. I apologize for this. Also, Yanan, I have to apologize to you as well, it was indeed me who was too short-sighted before. Qin Siya watched as Thunder Academy's people left, and then she apologized to Lin Shi and Gao Yanan seriously. In the future, I will reflect on this matter. Lin Shi laughed and said, you don't have to be this serious. Since I already said that I would prove it to you, then that meant that I already accepted your attitude, treated you as a friend. Now that you are seriously apologizing like this, if I say a bit more, I would feel a bit hypocritical, but if I don't say anything, I'll seem like I'm too arrogant, so this really leaves me in a bit of an awkward position. When he said this, Lin Shi gave Gao Yanan a look. Women might be a bit more petty on some aspects, so he was a bit worried about Gao Yanan's attitude. After all, back then, Qin Siya was extremely forceful in breaking off their relations. However, immediately afterwards, he knew that his own worries were unneeded, because Gao Yanan only gave Qin Siya a look, as if to figure out what she was thinking, and then asked, Qin Siya, say, if we pick up the things these Thunder Academy students dropped on their own, it shouldn't be violating this course's rules, right? Qin Siya's belly immediately released a rumbling noise. She immediately revealed a bitter laugh, and then shook Gao Yanan's hand. Lin Shi. Right at this time, a hoarse and shrill voice sounded, making everyone's eyes gather over. The one who spoke was Lu Ziyu, who was currently being supported by Bai Zihu and the others. His face was exceptionally pale, gaze filled with bitter resentment as he looked at Lin Shi, screaming, I admit that this time, you've brought honor for our Green One Academy, but you really are extremely hypocritical. Since you have this type of strength, why didn't you just show it before, always walking around with the 90 Gene Heaven's Choice reputation? Could it be that there is someone who doesn't care about their own reputation? In the end, weren't you just waiting for this type of moment to step out, use it to humiliate us? Now, today, you finally managed to wait until this moment. Since you have this type of strength, why didn't you take action first? Why did you have to wait until we were defeated first, and then take action to deal with Wang Yanmai? I know that once today's matter spreads, it will definitely immediately change the way in which many people look at you. However, I am even more certain that your heart is extremely sinister and hypocritical. Are you at all aware that you really are like a fly? Lin Shi, whose mood originally became better because of Gao Yanan and Qin Xia making up, suddenly felt his brows furrow deeply. His disdain and calmness didn't mean that he would always have patience. As such, he gave this frustrated and resentful golden spoon a look, coldly saying, "First of all, there is indeed no one who doesn't care about their own reputation, but if there are some secrets related to the matter that cannot be revealed, then one's reputation will naturally have to be momentarily ignored. Moreover, I do not admit that your opinion represents the so-called reputation. Could it be that your opinions are more authoritative, more important than the academy lecturer's opinions? In the end, you are only weighing me on your own. Someone like you, there is no way you can understand where my pride and confidence comes from. The so-called waiting for an opportunity to humiliate you all, if you insist on saying this, then it was completely brought upon yourselves. The others who have gossiped about me behind my back would just let it end today, they wouldn't be as unsightly as you." After a slight pause, Lin Shi continued to sneer, saying, "Second, did you really think it was that easy for me to deal with Wang Yanmai? Did it seem like I had 100% certainty in defeating him? According to your words, just now, after you were defeated, I could only just sit still, not take action, not go all out against Wang Yanmai." Lin Shi spoke the truth. Just now, everyone saw that Wang Yanmai's cultivation was much higher than his, while Lin Shi's pierce was definitely done out of a will to live. In reality, even Lin Shi himself, before he actually did it, couldn't guarantee that he could defeat Wang Yanmai with this strike. These words carried even more power because this was the truth. Together with the deeper meanings his previous words revealed, vaguely pointing out that Lu Ziyu and himself weren't even on the same level in this academy, this even more so made Lu Ziyu's face go from white to purple, his entire body trembling, yet he couldn't utter a single word in response. The two of us will never like each other, but not liking each other is one thing. There is no need for us to be friends, but there is no need to always look for some reasons to belittle the other party. Lin Shi looked at Lu Ziyu, and then said, "I've always felt that this world has many beautiful things, that there are many things I like to care about, that is why I don't want to waste my mood on some pointless disputes. In the end, just like a wandering tourist, if there is always an annoying face popping up, it really will ruin the mood. I hate this type of trouble, so from today on, I still wish for you to clearly remember our previous agreement. In the future, even when you see me, please don't say anything to me, move a bit further away. If you don't say anything, I obviously wouldn't go out of my way to humiliate someone like you either." "Good. You really are something." Lu Ziyu's face completely turned purple. Right now, he already didn't think about his own wrongs at all, only feeling like Lin Shi's words brought too much humiliation to his face before everyone's eyes. He stared viciously at Lin Shi, screaming, "I will respect our previous agreement, but I will also remember the humiliation you have placed on me today." However, what made his entire body suddenly become even more rigid was that after hearing his words, Bai Zihu and the other two medicine department students who were originally supporting him instead frowned, letting go, leaving his side. They walked not far from Lin Shi, then bowed towards him. Bai Zihu was the first one to apologize seriously. "Lin Shi, previously, we were indeed too disrespectful. Also, just now, I also thought over about our disrespect towards you in detail, realizing that it wasn't only because you tested 90 gene of strength, but also in your background and heaven's choice status. We offer our apologies." "You all," Lu Ziyu almost fainted from anger again, feeling like his face had been given another fierce slap. "Lin Shi, I didn't expect you to be this formidable. However, I still don't like you. Aren't you scared of trouble? I will just continue to make things difficult for you." Right at this time, Mu Shanzi, who didn't say anything all this time, also suddenly spoke, curling his lips and shouting at Lin Shi. Unless I manage to make you shout loudly, I am a pig 3 times, only then would my resentment be gone. Lin Shi laughed, suddenly feeling that this arrogant and despotic golden spoon, his performance from the start until now, always openly expressing his hostility, was still much better than always plotting and calculating in the dark. As such, he didn't really find Mu Shanzi that annoying. Is there any need to be this difficult? That was why right now, he had some mischievous thoughts. He laughed, and then shouted, I am a pig, I am a pig, I am a pig. Mu Shanzi was immediately stunned, staring at Lin Shi in disbelief. Lin Shi, you really are fierce enough. A moment later, he spoke this sentence, a bit speechless, and then immediately turned around to leave, saying, Mother F*** King, a student who is a pig, cultivating together with pigs, this isn't all that glorious of a thing either. Right when little fatty Meng Bai was drooling over the meat strips Thunder Academy left behind, and then heard Mu Shanzi's words, making him crack a grin and laugh, drool almost falling out of his mouth, on a hill not too far away, Bian Linghan was currently quietly laying in the shrubbery, her body completely concealed. In her hands was also an improvised bow, at her side quite a few self-made arrows. Including Lin Shi and Gao Yanan, no one noticed that she was hiding not too far away, nor did anyone know that her bow had always been aimed at those Thunder Academy people. Just now, Wan Yanmai was completely unreasonable, and as a wind stalker, the most powerful assassin, there was naturally even less of a need to talk reason. That was why just now, if Gao Yanan wasn't there, Wan Yanmai still insisting on taking action against Lin Shi, she definitely would have ruthlessly released an arrow, to the extent where they momentarily wouldn't even notice where the arrow came from. Chapter Volume 334. Pinching Ice and Snow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thunder Academy's students suddenly appeared on Heaven Ascension mountain range. There was naturally a deeper meaning behind this. Even the students of all different departments hurried over to this half-snow gray plains to cultivate, this perhaps also having some deeper meanings. However, there was no way Lin Shi could figure this out on his own, so he just decided not to think about it anymore, instead considering the problem of his future cultivation from here on. His eyes stopped over the dozens of strips of meat, jerky, and other simple jars in front of him. These Thunder Academy student spoils of war, even though it wasn't all that astonishing, it should already be enough to last him for the 2.5 days, as well as the 2-day return journey. That was why he already didn't have to waste any more time on the search of food. Apart from using his own unique ability, was there any other method of defeating an opponent like Wan Yanmai? Lin Shi began to think about this problem. He normally wouldn't think about things he couldn't figure out, or issues that were too far out, but an opponent on Wan Yanmai's level already appeared in his world, so he had to spend some time thinking about this. What the principal already stated very clearly on the monument left for him was that no one in this world was unmatched, and the ability the two shared could only be used once a day. Just like how he already used this ability today, if he encountered someone else at this level, what would happen then? Wan Yanmai's blade already left him shaken to the point where the area between his thumb and index finger split apart. It wasn't because he was already used to holding onto his weapon and facing his opponent while his arms were extremely sore already, if it wasn't because he was used to intense pain, Wan Yanmai's blade might have already knocked his weapon out of his hand. Even if it was him who did an upward thrust, he still couldn't easily make the body of an opponent on his level spin in the air. That was why Wan Yanmai had perhaps already reached high-level Soul Knight cultivation. His strength, under the support of Soul Force, probably exceeds his own by close to 100 gene. Lin Shi sat down on a rock, thinking to himself for a long time. Finally, the frown between his brows loosened. Then, he put away all of these meat strips, bringing a jar and a torch next to the creek. After starting a fire, he began to boil a pot of water. He tossed a piece of plump fox meat inside, starting to cook a pot of meat soup. When the soup completely boiled, before waiting for it to become even richer, Lin Shi already put out the fire. He sat down, facing the distant snow line, starting to sip on the soup. His gaze, however, continuously moved upwards, moving further and further up the snow line, eventually reaching the snowy peak hidden beneath the clouds. The continuous snowy peaks that reached beyond the clouds, the summits not even clearly visible, were precisely the Heaven Ascension mountain range, as well as the unknown place Lin Shi wanted to climb over and explore. With his current cultivation, it was obviously impossible. However, as he sipped on the hot meat soup, finished all of the fox meat in the pot, Lin Shi then stood up. He tightened the black cloak around himself, and then wrote a line of words on the ground. I am going to cultivate. Then, he began to quickly move upwards, walking towards the frigid peaks covered under ice and snow. Lin Shi already thought things through extremely clearly. During his days of cultivation in Green Luan Academy, he had also learned much more from Nkei, Tong Wei, and the others. He knew that soul force cultivation training really was just like using a bowl to collect small drops of water trickling out of a rock crack. What one had to rely on was the accumulation of time. That was why in this world, for cultivators who didn't have much of a difference in aptitude, it was normally the greater the age, the more profound their cultivation. However, apart from a few spiritual pills, there was another type of method that could make the effects of soul force training even greater, which was to sharpen one's willpower and spirit. When the body reached its limit, when one's spirit and willpower reached true sharpening, the effects of cultivation would become even better. This was the truth that Green Luan Academy's Ileo Mountain concluded after analyzing a tremendous amount of cases and data. As for the reasoning, Lin Shi believed that this soul force should precisely be the power created through spirit and willpower. The greater one's spirit and willpower were naturally, the more powerful the soul force produced through cultivation would be. Lin Shi also previously discussed the normal speed of cultivation with Nkei in detail. According to Nkei's judgment of his soul force cultivation, without the support of medicinal goods, his soul force cultivation speed was indeed a bit slower than others, roughly only 80% of others. Meanwhile, Lin Shi's speed of entering meditation cultivation was also number one among the new students, so Nkei's final verdict was naturally that Lin Shi's aptitude was poor. However, the conclusion Lin Shi reached was instead entirely different, because he was 2 bowls of water. That was why 80% speed was the result divided by 2. His true cultivation speed was instead 1.6 times that of a normal student. However, even if ordinary Green Luan Academy students could spend 8 hours in true meditation cultivation, and he had 2 hours more, resulting in 10 hours of meditation, there was no way he would have a 6-hour increase in cultivation speed. That was why towards the extra speed, he believed that it was because he suffered more each day, that the torment and tribulations he experienced each day were much greater than what ordinary students experienced. Ultimately, the more one suffered, the stronger one's spirit and willpower would become, the faster their cultivation speed would be. That was why previously, in the direct spear strikes trial, he already released a sigh. This cultivation, it really was suffering. Wang Yanmai was indeed not someone who he could face head-on, but Nkei also told him that a high-level soul knight's soul force, compared to a mid-level soul knight, was basically double. When he calculated it like that, the 2 bowls Lin Shi's soul force was already about the same as Wang Yanmai's. Then, as long as he made further breakthroughs in cultivation, on the true battlefield, even if he could only use his ability once a day, when he faced someone like Wang Yanmai, he had a way of dealing with this opponent. Exhaust the other party's soul force. In this half-snow gray plains, there was no direct spear strikes trial or blade and spear trial, but it had a vile environment that could similarly push his spirit to the absolute limit. Because he purposely tormented himself for the sake of cultivation, Lin Shi walked even faster, not hesitating to exhaust his stamina, continuously closing in on the snow line. He already thought things through extremely clearly, but what he didn't know was that in Heaven's core, on the wall within Vice Principal Xia's simple and crude study, was a line of flamboyant and bold cursive calligraphy. These words were similarly left behind by Principal Zhang, 8 characters in total. Between life and death, there is great terror. What was different, however, was that these 8 words were written in the characters everyone in Green One Academy in Yunqin recognized, and not the simplified Chinese characters Lin Shi was used to from his past world. To continuously challenge the limits of his own body and spirit to cultivate, this was indeed another way besides using some pill medicines to cultivate. However, this great terror between life and death, was just like how all cultivators had to first sense their own soul force, a threshold they had to overcome. Using true limits and danger to temper oneself, what if one accidentally died? As a cultivator, aside from obtaining abilities that exceeded those of an ordinary person, one could also then acquire glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. Even the most inferior cultivators, could at the very least attach themselves to an official, never have to worry about food or clothing. In the end, there still weren't that many cultivators in this world, so it was easier to obtain fame and profit. That was why those who could truly reach a point where they didn't hesitate to risk their lives for their own convictions became even more precious. As such, from the very start, Li Kaiyun already received the welcome of Madman Qin. Just because you could overlook fear once in life and death, did that mean you could ignore fear many times in the future? Perhaps even true warriors could not reach a point where they are truly fearless. That was why for those who decided to cultivate, there was still the most important point, which was mentality. There were some who weren't too restricted by fame and profile, some whose view of the world was more simple, some not attached to material things, didn't pity themselves. When one's heart was more calm, they would naturally enter meditation cultivation more easily. The stronger one's convictions, those with true bravery, were closer to becoming fearless. Meanwhile, as someone who had already died once, already completely understood what was important to him, he knew what he really wanted. He was just a simple tourist, together with his redo life-saving tool, this, between life and death, there is great terror, this threshold, for Lin Shi, didn't exist at all. Up ahead, water gradually turned to ice, the white air that he breathed out gradually turning into fine streaks of ice. The trees along the way slowly became low shrubbery, and then eventually completely disappeared, only strange ice and snow corroded by all types of mountain winds and time were visible. Night fell. Lin Shi sat down within a cave where he could slightly take shelter from the wind, entering meditation cultivation. Because his once-a-day ability still hadn't returned yet, despite being extremely worn out from the first half of the day, his body still feeling like he was in an ice bath, he still kept a bit of stamina, not directly challenging his own limits. After crossing the snow line, as he climbed further, he still remained extremely careful, checking that he wouldn't fall into the ice and snow after every step, and only then would he continue further. However, he still discovered that he underestimated the terror of Heaven Ascension mountain range. Before sunrise the next day, he was already forcibly roused awake from the cold. A large amount of stamina he saved up had almost completely vanished under the cold of the night. A large amount of ice and snow that came from who knew where completely covered a small frozen valley, turning it into a snow lake. The piercing cold left his entire body numb, momentarily unable to move. At the same time, he almost couldn't breathe. At first, Lin Shi was still a bit alarmed, but soon afterwards, peace returned to his heart, because when he woke up, that energy stream like soul force in his dantian began to release bits of heat, his almost frozen stiff body also starting to revive. This way, no matter how difficult the environment was, as long as he was still able to throw out a help-seeking, stench egg, the Academy's lecturers would still bring him out of his pitfall. A smear of golden light scattered across the towering Heaven Ascension mountain range, the sun rose. Above Heaven Ascension mountain range's snow line, heavy snowfall poured down, the mountain winds also stronger than yesterday. Within this place, there was even a bit of frozen dregs and fragmented icy edges flying around. However, Lin Shi, who already didn't have much stamina left, after finishing a piece of smoked meat, instead walked out from this cave that blocked a bit of the wind, welcoming the even colder and crazier wind and snow. It was because the roulette that he could move already appeared, and he could feel that the longer he spent in this type of bone-piercing extreme coldness, the clearer the shaking in the veins of his arms would become. In front of the snow lake, while standing on a protruding ice chunk that was about a person's height, he reached out his hands. His hands and arms quickly became cold to the point of almost being frozen, but the feeling between the flesh of his palm and fingers instead became even sharper. Suddenly, 3 fingers reached out, pinching a strand of cold wind, pinching a snowflake. In that instant, he seemed to be able to sense where this strand of cold wind came from, and then where it was going to flow towards, how much strength it carried. He could even sense how this snowflake melted on his fingertips, how much energy it sucked away from his fingertips. With a slight shake of his 3 fingers, he flung aside the snowflake that had just melted into water. The fine water droplets instantly formed frozen strands in the air. Meanwhile, at the same time, in Lin Shi's brain, there was an arrow that flew out from between his fingertips. Chapter Volume 335. Indescribable Killing in 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Shi stood on the ice, embracing the wind and snow. Windstalkers not only possess powerful archery skills, they also understand their surroundings, able to sense and judge the flow of wind. They can clearly sense the wind direction, as well as the effects of the wind on the arrows. This way, the arrows will become more precise, also going further, becoming more powerful. Tong Wei had spoken these words before. Now, in Lin Shi's mind, these words seemed extremely wonderful. He originally only wished to borrow this extremely vile environment to push his body and spirit to the limit of collapse, increase his soul force cultivation by doing this. However, he instead never expected himself to actually pinch wind and snow, gaining a sudden insight, a breakthrough in his archery. It was just like a fisherman who originally only intended to catch a single fish in a frozen lake, but apart from a fish, also caught an otter. That was why Lin Shi was full of joy, completely unaware that his hair and brows had already been dyed white by the ice and snow, looking just like an elder that had been frozen rigid. What exactly do you want to accomplish? Cultivating like this, can you endure it? Right now, Lin Shi had no idea that in another cave not far from where he was, a petite figure that was so cold it was shaking all over was full of confusion and shock as she stared at this faintly discernible young man in the ice and snow, truly worried that he might be directly frozen to death just like that. Suddenly, Lin Shi sensed something strange, as if there was a type of powerful aura that changed a certain wind direction in the upper currents. He raised his head, forcefully blinking his eyes, looking towards the even higher land covered under the ice and snow. As if he had just predicted the future, he saw a youngster appear by an ice and snow cliff. That youngster's appearance was actually a bit similar to the Nikki Wu he was familiar with from his past world, and the figure in the ice and snow was incredibly steady and resolute. That was why Lin Shi's first impression of this figure was that it was outstanding, and then he felt that it was glorious. It was because this youngster stood by the upper winds. Not only did he block a bit of wind and snow, the clothes he wore were golden. This was a dazzling color, as well as Thunder Academy uniform's color. This was a Thunder Academy student. There was actually a Thunder Academy student cultivating in this type of extremely vile frozen tundra environment. Just as Lin Shi was a bit stunned, that Thunder Academy student clearly saw him as well, taking a few steps forward. That was why Lin Shi saw him even more clearly. This was a refined and elegant youngster. His thick and black hair was braided together behind him, continuously swinging about behind him under the wind and snow. Helan Yueshi saw Lin Shi. Just like how Lin Shi immediately noticed him, he also sensed that this Green One Academy student was outstanding, also leaving him a bit indescribably shocked. There was actually a Green One Academy who didn't hesitate to risk his life, cultivating in this type of place. Cultivators had many paths before them they could take, but there were some paths only the most outstanding could take. Originally, Helan Yueshi felt like he was the only one on this path, but suddenly, he saw a fellow traveler. This was an extremely peculiar feeling. Heelan Ueshi felt like this Green One Academy student would definitely become his predestined most powerful opponent. That was why, unlike Lin Shi's calmness, his heart immediately became filled with heaven overflowing icy killing intent. If this was somewhere else, with his own status and the other party's status, he would definitely hide this wave of killing intent extremely well. However, this was on the barren snowy mountain, completely lacking life. Meanwhile, judging from the other party's figure, his stamina was also close to its limit. That was why, as long as he could kill the other party in a clean and efficient manner before he could release a help signal, he was sure that not even a Green One Academy lecturer would notice. Thus, Heelan Ueshi, this most powerful expert from Thunder Academy, immediately made his decision. In this wind and snow-covered world, he was going to kill Lin Shi, bury this opponent who might pose a great threat to him in the future. That was why he didn't utter a single word. The moment he saw where the other party was clearly, he directly leapt down from the frozen cliff. After crushing a piece of rigid ice and snow below his feet, his entire body leapt out again, steadily landing on a second piece of ice near Lin Shi. Because of the harsh, foul wind bloody rain aura on Heelan Ueshi's body, and because he didn't utter any other words or try to cover anything up, Lin Shi immediately sensed the hostility and killing intent of this outstanding Thunder Academy student. Lin Shi immediately transferred the simple and unadorned longbow into his hand, his slightly rigid fingers picking up an arrow. Even though he didn't know why the other party would so suddenly display killing intent, since the other party wanted to kill him, then he also had to kill the other party. His rationality was just that simple. The petite figure that was curled up not too far away also sensed the killing intent released from Heelan Ueshi's body. The other party's tremendous strength made her feel that the current Lin Shi wasn't his opponent at all. As such, without even thinking an extra thought, she walked out from the frozen cave, moreover forcefully crushed several icicles, producing quite a bit of sound. Heelan Ueshi's figure suddenly stopped. This pressure came from the simple and crude bow in Lin Shi's hands, as well as that female Green One Academy student who was similarly dressed in a black cloak who suddenly appeared. Even though the bow in Lin Shi's hands was extremely simple and crude, Lin Shi's stance made him suddenly feel that this simple and crude bow might be able to inflict harm on him. Even if there was merely a slight injury left behind, it might be difficult to escape the pursuit of Green One Academy's lecturers, and there was no way he could escape conclusive proof. Moreover, under this situation where the other side suddenly had an extra person, even if he truly could kill Lin Shi, the female student who suddenly appeared would inevitably have time to release an emergency signal. It truly is a pity. Heelan Ueshi sighed inwardly, a hint of regret appearing between his handsome and straight brows. He didn't continue forward, starting to withdraw his own killing intent. He only looked at the bow-wielding Lin Shi in the distance, asking, "What is your name?" Even though he didn't understand where the other party's powerful killing intent came from, Lin Shi obviously didn't like this type of aggressive person. As such, he coldly looked at Heelan Ueshi, asking in return with a voice even colder than ice, "Who are you?" "I am Heelan Ueshi, number 1 in strength from this group of Thunder Academy students," Heelan Ueshi said while looking at Lin Shi. For normal people, stating his own name, that he was ranked 1, would definitely seem arrogant and conceited, but his expression was still extremely natural, as if those words were his to begin with, so he spoke them as if it was inevitable and correct. Lin Shi looked at Heelan Ueshi, saying, "I'm Lin Shi. Turns out you were Self-Defense Department's Heaven's Choice." Heelan Ueshi's brows jumped, his voice sinking. "We will meet again." After saying this Thunder Academy new student who spoke his title as number 1 in strength as if it was inevitable and right turned around, entering the ice and snow. After just a moment of time, he vanished without a trace. Lin Shi's brows furrowed tightly. The other party's killing intent and the words he spoke before he left even more so made him feel that Thunder Academy's appearance in Heaven Ascension mountain range carried deeper meaning. I wonder if Nkui knows a bit about the details, if she would be willing to tell me some things. Originally, Lin Shi wasn't willing to spend more time thinking about this, but now, it was different. Heelan Yueshi's expression before he left made him understand that as long as there was a chance in the future, Heelan Yueshi might still take action to kill him without any hesitation. This might be the first true enemy he faced in this world. After putting away the bow, Lin Shi turned around. Appearing in his line of sight was a spiritual sacrifice department female student he didn't recognize. Underneath her black cloak were spiritual sacrifice department clothes. This slim female student's lips were already frozen to the point where they were a dark purple, hair turning a bit yellow, chin a bit too sharp. Judging from her appearance, the first impression Lin Shi had was that the other party was a bumpkin from birth, moreover came from a destitute family, a bumpkin who didn't receive proper nourishment before. Lin Shi looked at this spiritual sacrifice department female student who also looked like she had exceptional willpower, unable to help but ask, "You are from spiritual sacrifice department, what is your name? What are you doing here?" "I'm Ai Chilan." Even though she understood the other party's meaning and importance to the academy, when she thought about how Lin Shi charged into the wind and snow like a lunatic, and then at the danger just now, Ai Chilan still looked at Lin Shi with a bit of annoyance, saying, "And what are you doing?" "Bino Eldam." Lin Shi stared blankly, saying, "I was cultivating, of course." Ai Chilan gave Lin Shi a look. "I was too." Lin Shi sighed with admiration, saying, "You really are formidable as well, daring to come here to cultivation." Lin Shi's words left Ai Chilan momentarily speechless. Turns out he knew there were many dangers here, yet he still came here to cultivate. Even though this was a bit crazy, this Green One Academy, indeed had many courageous talented individuals with this type of bravery. Her annoyance immediately completely disappeared, instead replaced by much more strange emotions. Lin Shi didn't know that Ai Chilan and himself similarly had some unique secret identities. He just felt like this spiritual sacrifice department female student was a bit introverted, not great with words. However, just from how this spiritual sacrifice department female student appeared, there was no way he could hate her. As such, he turned around to look in the direction Heelan Yueshi left, and then as if he was carefreely talking to a friend, said, "Say, that fella from just now, do you think he wanted to kill me?" Ai Chilan's body shuddered, pulling the cloak closer around her body. She nodded seriously. "I believe so. Your stamina is already at its limit. Just now, why did you still want to use your bow to face him, and not instead immediately release a signal?" After nodding, Ai Chilan looked at Lin Shi. She couldn't help but add, "He could easily jump down from that cliff, so I reckon he has at least high-level soul knight cultivation. Where do you get your confidence from, to actually face him?" Lin Shi naturally couldn't tell her about his redo ability. After some hesitation, he laughed and said, "The stance he jumped down with was too beautiful, and he really was strong. Just now, I also gained some enlightenment, so I really wanted to fire an arrow at him, see if I can injure him at all." "You really are a madman." Ai Chilan cursed out inwardly. However, when she thought about it, true Braveslayers were, perhaps all madmen like this. She could only shake her head, thinking that if she purely judged from outward appearance, she definitely wouldn't think that the calm and easygoing Lin Shi would actually have such an unyielding and crazy side. "Are you still going to continue cultivating here?" After she took a deep breath, she looked at Lin Shi, asking this. Lin Shi nodded, seriously saying, "Since there's now this type of opponent who wants me dead, I naturally need to put in a bit more effort." Chapter Volume 336. The negotiation that has finally arrived. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By a small stream. Meng Bai was currently cooking a jar of soup. Bian Linghan was roasting a piece of fox meat. Even though they shamelessly took the meat strips Thunder Academy's students left behind, the simple and crude pottery he removed from their bodies also helped Meng Bai greatly. With a pot to make soup with, he could drink hot water that warmed his body at any time. Moreover, right now, the pot of soup he made with more than 10 small fish and some roots looked quite delicious as well. As for Bian Linghan, whose archery was excellent just like Lin Shi's, catching prey was also much easier, so she didn't starve these 2 days either. A pot of rather delicious fish soup was completed. Just where did Lin Shi run to? He hasn't appeared after all this time. After Meng Bai muttered this to himself, he used 2 pieces of dried wood to pick up this pot of fish soup, preparing to sit down and properly enjoy it. However, the moment he turned around, he was immediately stunned. The pot of fish soup rocked back and forth, as if it might just fall at any time. Bian Linghan turned around in confusion. Only, when she just took a look, she suddenly stood up. When their eyes moved up a hill, several hundred steps away, a single person stood there. This person was precisely Lin Shi, who had already disappeared for 2 days. Lin Shi's black cloak, the self-defense department clothes he wore inside, everything including his hair and brows, was dripping with water. His cheeks were incredibly pale and sallow. When he saw Meng Bai and Bian Linghan, who just saw him, he revealed a smile. However, after he took another breath, he fell heavily into the ground like a rock. Meng Bai dropped a small half of the fish soup, while Bian Linghan didn't care about the fox meat hanging over the fire, the two's faces instantly becoming extremely pale. Meanwhile, right when the two were running frantically towards Lin Shi, in a forest to the side, a sorry-looking Mu Shanzi just happened to be holding an egg from who knew what kind of bird, walking out. When he saw Lin Shi fall, this self-defense department golden spoon was immediately stunned as well. Lin Shi, just what exactly happened? Bian Linghan's heart immediately tightened. She immediately wanted to support Lin Shi up, but the moment she touched Lin Shi's body, she instead discovered that Lin Shi's skin was simply like a block of ice, lacking even a hint of warmth. Apart from Lin Shi's breathing that still had a bit of warmth, almost his entire body was cold. "Don't worry, I just need to roast some stuff to eat and I'll be fine. I spent 2 days cultivating up there, and I didn't eat anything today either." Lin Shi laughed with difficulty, and then said in a weak and powerless manner, "Helping me over to that fire shouldn't be violating the rules, right? You went up above the snow line to cultivate." The chilliness coming out of Lin Shi's body and this sentence made Bian Linghan's breathing stop. She immediately couldn't help but raise her head to look at the distant snowy peaks shrouded in clouds. They were completely impossible to make out. Meanwhile, Meng Bai, who saw many strips of meat hanging from Lin Shi's body, really couldn't understand, inadvertently asking, "You have so much meat on you, why didn't you eat it?" "They were frozen too hard up there, I couldn't chew through them." When he heard Lin Shi's reply, Meng Bai was stunned, finally understanding what Lin Shi did in the 2 days he disappeared for. Bian Linghan also finally knew why Lin Shi's entire body seemed like it had been flung into a frozen sea. The Academy's black cloak had exceptional cold resistance and weather resistance properties. Even if rain landed on it, it would quickly slide off, unable to seep through at all. The reason why Lin Shi was like this was definitely because the ice and snow on his body, hair, and brows melted and flowed down. "BNOLDM, Lin Shi, you've gone mad. Do you not care about your life anymore, actually running to that type of place to cultivate for more than 2 days?" Because of alarm, because of pity, Bian Linghan and Meng Bai quickly supported Lin Shi over to the fire, unable to help but sternly criticize him. Mu Shanzi, who stopped at the edge of the forest, saw Lin Shi's current state clearly. He also heard Bian Linghan's scolding clearly. His eyes immediately went round. Motherf * King. "Lin Shi, you are a bit too fierce, right?" After this golden spoon, whose background wasn't bad, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, he couldn't help but speechlessly speak these vulgar words. Then, he shook his head, turning around and leaving. Right at this time, Lin Shi, whose body was still dripping water, looked at the bonfire that was already not far from him, a somewhat satisfied and proud expression appearing on his face. He turned his head slightly, and then with a sound only Bian Linghan could hear, he explained quietly by her ears. "Even though it does seem extremely crazy, it was worth it as well. My soul force has increased quite a bit. I should be able to reach mid-level soul night cultivation now. Also, I even pinched wind and snow, my archery should have made great progress too. Pinched wind and snow. Bien Lingen's body immediately shook. These words, even if Meng Bai heard her, he might not know the meaning. However, as someone with true wind stalker talent, she, who had experienced wild stalker special training with Lin Shi, naturally understood the significance of this extremely well. Heaven's Core Peak, Vice Principal Xia and Xiao Mingxian, who was somewhat nervously patting his belly, were currently looking at a drawing on a small scroll. The drawing had more than 10 fragmented scenes in total, drawn in an extremely simple manner. Altogether, it was precisely the final thrust in Lin Shi and Wan Yanmai's battle, portrayed extremely clearly. Can you see through how he was able to deliver this winning blow? Vice Principal Xia stared at it for a long time, and then released a sigh, turning around to ask Xiao Mingxian. Xiao Mingxian shook his head, his reply still extremely direct. How could I see through it? With his cultivation, this doesn't make any sense. Seems like this can still only be summed up with talent. Vice Principal Xia laughed, and then said, his speed of cultivation seems to be quite fast. Not just quite fast, but rather extremely fast. Xiao Mingxian, who had access to all the real data, gave Vice Principal Xia a look, saying, even if he doesn't have any pills to help him, in terms of true soul force accumulation, for his 1 month of cultivation, others will need at least a month and a half to catch up. Vice Principal Xia nodded. That is why the next time he meets Wan Yanmai, he should still be able to win. Xiao Mingxian became quiet, and then nodded. Most likely. It's about time as well. Vice Principal Xia nodded again, and then stood up. I am going to meet with them. Xiao Mingxian also stood up, his expression serious as he nodded. All right. After waiting for 7 whole days of time, the fleet that set out from Central Province's Imperial City, consisting of Government Sector Vice Head Yan Shaoqing, Justice Sector's Great Commander Feng Qianhan and Central Province Guards Yi Xiaofeng, finally met Vice Principal Xia, who could represent the Academy. The green stone bricks on the ground were like a green river in this great hall. Vice Principal Xia's wrinkled covered face looked at these 3 Yunqin influential officials, opening his mouth and asking, coming all the way here to meet me, what do you all wish to say? Even though the other party waited for 7 whole days, Government Sector's number 2, Yan Shaoqing, who with just a stamp of his feet, would leave, who knew how many people shaken, didn't show the slightest bit of impatience. He looked at this true great figure, and then slowly recounted Imperial City's decree. I believe Vice Principal Xia should already be aware that the Imperial Princess suffered an attack in Rudong City. Among the attackers were 2 assassins from Great Mang. The reason for this is related to our Yunqin no longer being as powerful as before, or else Great Mang and Tangcang wouldn't dare publicly treat us as enemies. His Majesty is quite worried, because the one who was ambushed was the princess, so the next one might be him. That is why His Highness wishes to ask Vice Principal Xia, ask Green One Academy to help him a bit with the worry, lend more support. Because the implications should have definitely been understood by the other party, and this already dragged on for 7 days, that assassination suddenly seemed a bit distant, lacking as much impact, yet now that he spoke about it, even Yan Shaoqing felt a bit awkward, unable to help but feel like even though he was already a carp that passed through the trial to become a dragon, the one he was facing was a true old flood dragon, already in existence, who wasn't on the same level. However, what needed to be said still had to be said. His Majesty's intention is that Green One Academy's cultivation methods and the pill medicines used for cultivation are all Yunqin Empire's true treasures. During these years, the 3 great academies have all produced many top-notch talents. If cultivation methods and pill recipes were granted to the best of the best among the 3 great academies, then for the students who will bring the greatest contributions to Yunqin, as well as those who are forever loyal, the effects might be even better, thus possibly improving the present situation a bit. Vice Principal Xia listened to everything like still water. He shook his head, gently saying, Vice Head Yan, please pass on a message to His Highness from me in my place, we do not agree with his viewpoint. Doing things this way might produce even more formidable cultivation geniuses, but some cultivators who originally might serve great uses, will instead fall prematurely. When our Green One Academy offers our resources to our students, we will already make careful considerations, offer them to suitable people, moreover allow the resources to display the most effects they can. This was a completely expected response. Yan Shaoqing's eyes stopped over Yi Xiaofeng beside him. It was now precisely the moment for this Central Continent Guard's leader to speak up. All he hoped for was for this new wave Central Continent Guard, after being beaten down by this academy's lecturer, was for him to still speak with a bit of strength. Yi Xiaofeng coughed twice, and then slowly said, Vice Principal Xia, however, His Highness has already given the imperial decree, and Zhou Shoufu and the others have already agreed. Whether it is correct or not, as subjects, we can only listen, still have to try it out first. Vice Principal Xia still gently shook his head, saying, His Majesty should listen to my opinion. But His Majesty has already made his decision. The lines on Yi Xiaofeng's face became firm again, making Yan Shaoqing and Feng Qianhan feel that for Zhou Shoufu to send this type of person here, there was still a bit of reason. Forget about the other things, many of the materials for the pill medicines were provided by His Majesty. Now that His Majesty has difficulties, wishing for the Academy to provide a bit more support, could it be that Vice Principal Xia is not even willing to listen to His Majesty's words? Give it a try. When Vice Principal Xia heard these unyielding words, he instead laughed, asking in return, Do you feel that what we invested and contributed towards Yunqin is still not enough? If you can find someone who has done more than me, then I can accept some of the words you have just spoken. Yi Xiaofeng immediately became speechless, because facts were the hardest to retort against. Even if he searched the entire Yunqin Empire, those who paid more than him, had greater glory, perhaps there was only Principal Zhang. However, if Principal Zhang was still alive, then he would even more so refuse the words he spoke. The current emperor is wise and capable, he won't pass on a completely baseless decree. Yan Shaoqing respectfully spoke, looking at Vice Principal Xia and saying, He has already anticipated this opinion of Vice Principal Xia. He only wishes for me to convey to Vice Principal Xia that your respected self and some other lecturers might have this opinion on this matter, but the Academy still has many other professors who previously brought up objections towards the education of Green One Academy. Moreover, this time, government and justice sectors have also specially calculated the military contributions and promotions of Thunder and Green One Academy's students. What cannot be refuted is that in the past decade, the performance of students from Thunder Academy has completely surpassed Green One Academy's students. After a slight pause, Yan Shaoqing looked at Vice Principal Xia, saying, His Highness believes that the reason for this is a certain classified teaching reform in the past decade. Chapter Volume 337. Everyone has weaknesses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 10 years ago, Professor Tang, Lecturer Su and others had proposed a change in Green One Academy's way of teaching. At that time, the most important proposal was to use some unpardonable death convicts and captives to carry out a life and death struggle, use this to raise the true fighting ability of students. This proposal, because of your respected self and some professors' opposal, was directly rejected. Yan Shaoqing still spoke with a respectful and low voice, declaring, however, according to His Highness' wishes, this education modification was implemented in Thunder Academy. In the past decade, it has indeed produced clear effects. Yan Shaoqing's words, even though the tone was flat, still made everyone hear, Feng Qianhan, Yi Xiaofeng, and even Vice Principal Xia's eyes develop a trace of coldness. It was because everyone understood it clearly, behind these words, were real lives. Thunder Academy really has quite the methods, these things actually even hidden from us. Vice Principal Xia's consistently gentle face displayed a trace of coldness. He and some others in the Academy would always be the most loyal followers of Principal Zhang's view of humanity. This was something that touched the bottom line of him and some others in the Academy. There were some things that might be difficult for outsiders to understand, but in this world, there was perhaps no one who understood Principal Zhang better than himself and a few Academy elders. In the outside world, others might think that Principal Zhang marched through the world with a sword in hand in pursuit of imperishable glory in Yunqing, but they knew that Principal Zhang's natural disposition was to live a simple life. From start until end, he wasn't in existence on the same level as some influential officials of this world. The so-called fame and profit of this world also completely didn't matter to him. The reason someone like him stood out was only because in this Yunqing Empire, there were many people he cared about. When one falls in disgrace, the whole family is doomed. He fought for these people. Something that he always said was that if one didn't have a basic respect and mercy for life, then that person couldn't be said to have humanity, and these people without humanity would often do many terrifying things. The current emperor and imperial court always believed that the academy didn't place the highest imperial power in their eyes, all because of the academy's strength. In reality, the root of the reason why they didn't understand, for those who have always followed Principal Zhang, this imperial power, this empire, weren't things they cared about at all. They only cared about those they needed to protect, as well as the radiance they persisted with inside. That was why from the very first lesson the academy taught, the loyalty all of the new students vowed to uphold, was only loyalty to their comrades, and not loyalty to the current emperor. This could be said to be disgraceful and unfilial, but this was what many people in the academy persisted with, because if they couldn't even remain loyal to their own companions who they fought through life and death with, what kind of humanity was there left? I understand the emperor wishes to exert himself vigorously to build a strong country, but I never expected him to be this impatient. Vice Principal Xia looked at these three important figures who came out from Central Continent's imperial court, saying, however, do you all really think that in these 10 years, Thunder Academy's performance being more outstanding than Green One Academy's students is only because of the so-called modification of teachings? Compared to 16 years ago when Principal Zhang was still here, how much resources do we receive now? Could it be that you all believe that a momentary performance can prove anything? Sprouts spoiled through excessive enthusiasm might momentarily seem taller than other sprouts, but after a decade, 2 decades, can you guarantee they will grow taller? After a slight pause, Vice Principal Xia released an aura that made this incredibly spacious Great Hall's temperature immediately drop a few degrees. You all are all cultivators as well, but I fear there is some fundamental reasoning you all do not understand. If you aren't even clear on why you are fighting, what you are even persisting with, could it be that cultivators who are only incited by fame and profit, can exceed cultivators who truly understand the reason for cultivation? Vice Principal Xia's words were spoken extremely impolitely, but Yi Xiaofeng instead didn't get angry in the slightest, instead suddenly staring blankly, as if he suddenly realized something crucial to his own cultivation. Feng Qianhan's white brows furrowed slightly, while Yan Shaoqing instead released a bitter smile, looking at Vice Principal Xia and saying, Vice Principal Xia, these things you are talking about, I naturally understand them all. I fear that it is perhaps precisely because I understand them, that Zhou Shoufu would make me preside over things. Come discuss this matter with your respected self. I believe your respected self understands even more clearly than us that the one we are ultimately facing in this matter, the one we must convince, is the current emperor. Even if we understand that he is wrong, perhaps your respected self is the only one who can openly state that he is wrong. During these years, the academy has done so much for Yunqing, so your respected self definitely doesn't want to see Yunqing fall into the abyss. As such, your respected self must prove it to His Highness. Since even before you all arrived, Thunder Academy's new students have already begun cultivating in Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. Vice Principal Xia gave Yan Shaoqing a look, then he naturally should have already prepared how he wishes for me to prove myself. What is this way of proving he wishes to see so badly? When he heard Vice Principal Xia's words, Yan Shaoqing, this government sector vice head who had long grown accustomed to not showing happiness or anger on his face couldn't help but freeze up, inwardly sighing, knowing that the other party already completely understood those undercurrents that are almost impossible to see, as well as the will of those individuals in the imperial court. Even that figure on the dragon throne with similarly powerful ambition and intelligence, before this elder, seemed a bit lower, this type of powerful figure making him inwardly produce a powerful feeling of defeat once again. After a deep exhale, Yan Shaoqing said, His Highness has indeed foreseen that Vice Principal Xia would find this very hard to accept, that he has to give you all a chance to convince him. That is why His Highness' intention is that Green One Academy and Thunder Academy will each pick 5 new students, and then carry out a true practical training. The two academies' current students' methods are entirely different, and so the shorter the time, the easier it is to see entirely different results. Moreover, the current situation is quite pressing, so the Emperor's intention is that the earlier this confrontation is held, the better. When he heard that Vice Principal Xia wasn't willing to meet with us during these days, yesterday, His Highness already set out for Heaven Ascension Mountain Range, wishing to personally discuss things with Vice Principal Xia. Vice Principal Xia gave Yan Shaoqing a look, and then said, Fine, you all can tell him that before he comes, our Green One Academy will choose 5 new students. Yan Shaoqing stared blankly for a moment, not expecting Vice Principal Xia to agree so easily. It was because according to the calculations of those individuals behind the heavy layers of curtains, Vice Principal Xia's display should be much more forceful than this. Bnoel Dem however, after staring blankly for a bit, this government sector vice head immediately stood up, showing Vice Principal Xia an extremely serious and sincere bow of respect. It was because he understood extremely clearly, that if Vice Principal Xia didn't agree, there would inevitably be even greater bloodshed, and most of this blood wouldn't be from the Academy's people. Regardless of whether it was the Academy or Vice Principal Xia's actions during these years, it was all enough to earn his respect. However, Vice Principal Xia was already extremely old, moreover, the Academy had so many people who shared different opinions. As such, not only the current emperor, even he himself couldn't help but wonder what would happen if someone like Vice Principal Xia left this world, if the Academy was still as powerful as before, if the Academy no longer did things the same way, would they get involved with imperial power then? In the depths of Tongcang ancient country's imperial palace. The swaying milky white oil lamps illuminated the court floor's scarlet yellow-colored glass. When the radiance shone on some of the walls' gorgeous Buddhist paintings, an extremely peaceful and sacred scene was formed. A palace maid dressed in ordinary hemp clothes was currently carrying a bowl of medicinal soup, carefully feeding a haggard-looking old lady. The old lady was clearly seriously ill, her face covered in a layer of gloominess that didn't go away, eyes powerlessly sunken. However, her appearance was kind, in her hands gripped a string of red coral Buddhist beads, shaking from time to time. The young Emperor Feng Xian appeared from behind the layers of golden curtains. He waved towards the palace maid who carried a bowl of medicine soul, indicating that she didn't need to greet him, and then received the bowl, personally feeding this older woman one spoon after another. The moment he appeared, this old woman smiled in an extremely relieved manner. Only after extremely patiently drinking all of the medicinal soup, did she breathe slowly, look at the young emperor with a doting expression, at this individual who had the highest authority in all of Tongcang ancient country, asking, What troubles you today? Mother Empress. Emperor Feng Xian placed his own hand on the old woman's hand, looking at his sickly mother who, while being constantly conspired against and falling ill, in the end still completely passed down the imperial throne to himself, with great love and respect. With a slight frown, he said, Green One Academy's news have come back, they actually refused our proposal, actually not wishing to use Nan Gongma to exchange for him. When she saw the frowning young emperor, Tongcang ancient country's Empress Dowager revealed a smile, opening her mouth to say something, but what first came out was instead a wave of intense coughing, to the extent where her entire body continuously shook. In this quiet palace, it seemed especially piercing and worrisome. Emperor Feng Xian bit his lips, his eyes revealed an expression of self-blame, thinking that he shouldn't have come to discuss this matter with his mother. However, his hand slightly tightened, the coughing Empress Dowager instead using a bit more force, consoling him. During these years, the place where he is imprisoned is something only us few know about. Green One Academy was always unable to rescue him, their refusal is naturally because they know how much he has suffered under our hands, to seek a bit of a price back for him. After the coughing stopped, the Empress Dowager looked at Emperor Feng Xian, saying, however, we must complete this exchange. Emperor Feng Xian began to think deeply to himself, asking, Mother Empress, why is that? Nan Gongma is a cultivation genius, and he also has many of Green Luan Academy's cultivation secrets on him. Meanwhile, Gu Xinin hasn't spoken after so many years, we cannot receive anything of value from him, so this kind of exchange in itself cannot be considered a loss. Tuncang Ancient Country's Empress Dowager looked at Emperor Feng Xian, benevolently and slowly explaining, however, you must not forget that your uncle's only son also died under his hands, and he also might have some of our Sanskrit temple's cultivation methods, so we can complete this exchange with Green Luan Academy, but we cannot let him return to Green Luan Academy alive. Your uncle definitely won't let him return to Green Luan Academy alive either. If it wasn't for your uncle's only son dying under his hands, perhaps you might not have so easily succeeded this imperial throne. However, even without a male offspring that I understand him extremely well, if I die, he definitely won't be as content with his place as he is right now. If you ordered him to help you do something else, he definitely won't really put in the effort, but Gu Xinin is someone who personally destroyed all of his dreams. His son who he loved so dearly, who he fostered for more than 20 years, placed all of his hopes on, died under Gu Xinin's hands. This hatred, even if it was me, I might not be able to maintain calmness. That is why on this matter of Gu Xinin, he definitely can't be allowed to return to Green Luan Academy alive. He will definitely truly go all out, because this is something that will forever bother him. Perhaps for him, before he has gotten rid of this sore point will be even more important than the imperial throne. Because she spoke so much in one breath, the Empress Dowager rested for a long time, and only then did she slowly say, you have to remember, no matter how powerful you are, there will still be a weak point, even me, even if it is a great master in Sanskrit temple, they all have weak points. This was your uncle's only weak point, that is why this time's exchange must be completed. Let him and Green Luan Academy's people fight to the death.